Chapter 12:21 Seeking Tao Eyes. The long staircase gleamed translucently as white mist swirled upward. Faint chimes of music came from the small pavilion at the horizon. Inside, along the inner hall side, stood a row of jade chime bells. Two maidens in long robes played them quietly, their garments trailing across the floor, half concealed within the drifting mist. Before them sat a long desk, which was occupied by a woman in a pale tea-colored gown. She rested her chin upon one hand while writing with the other, displaying a serene and ethereal bearing. Beside her on the desk lay a pipa, its surface faintly reflecting light. Shehui had been stationed at the horizon for many years. Few immortals ever set foot in this place. Even the maidens within the pavilion were spirit attendants sent by the Supreme Yin Court. They could not speak, and were only capable of performing simple tasks, such as remembering rhythms to strike the bells. She oversaw 8 courtyards and towers. The 4 outer courtyards were staffed with attendants and clerks, while 3 of the 4 immortal pavilions had their immortal officials reassigned elsewhere, leaving her largely undisturbed. Shehui was content with the peace. She had always been able to endure long periods of quiet cultivation. The immortal officials of these towers were not directly under her command, and the domain itself belonged to others. Zhang Gao had assigned this tranquil post to her, and she rarely interfered. Only the endlessly talkative official of the remaining pavilion occasionally sought her out. Her brush paused for a moment. The lesser yin art she was transcribing was about 70% complete. Setting the pen down, she looked up as a maid entered, bowed respectfully in the center of the hall, and said, "My lady Dangjiang has arrived." Shehui frowned slightly, helpless. It had been exactly 30 days, and he was right on time. She could only nod and say, "Let him come up." The maid withdrew. Soon, a young man stepped into the pavilion. He had a broad forehead and thick hair, and after flicking the patterned sleeves of his robe, he bowed deeply, saying, "Immortal official Dangjiang of the 7th Profound Pavilion Archives pays respects to Lady of Wugui Lesser Yin." "You've come again." A pale circular mark glowed faintly between Shehui's brows as her slightly weary gaze scanned him. She said, Why do you never stay on the eastern side to proof and correct the scriptures properly? Why must you come to me every time? What is it this time?" Dangjiang had already learned Shehui's temperament over these days. Though her tone carried reproach, it was mere complaint. She never truly meant to punish him. Apart from her quiet nature, she was an excellent superior. Feeling pleased, he simply replied, "If only I were truly comparing and editing texts, my lady. You know I can't keep my mouth shut. I only proof but never cross-check, and I'm constantly worried about making errors in the techniques." The act of cross-checking required 2 people, and Dangjiang was merely looking for company. Shehui knew he would complain of boredom, so she didn't engage in idle talk. "Speak your business." Only then did Dangjiang draw from his sleeve a command token, as long as his forearm and entirely pure white, etched with the silvery patterns of the Supreme Yin. It shimmered faintly as he held it up with both hands and said respectfully, "I am under orders for a mission, and I beg your aid in accompanying me, my lady." Shehui raised her brows and finally rose to her feet. She picked up the pipa from the desk and held it in her arms, gliding gracefully downward as she said casually, "It's been so long. At last there's something proper to do." He, Dangjiang chuckled and hesitated before speaking. "One of my subordinates in the mortal realm, not nearly as capable as I am, of course, but with some skill, sent me word at year's end. He claims to have captured a peacock this time, and not an ordinary one either. It supposedly practices the Buddhist spell arts of the Western lands. I've no idea how much merit that's worth, or how it compares to the last demonic creature we caught." A pale tea-colored cloud rose beneath Shehui's feet, lifting both of them as they drifted southward. She replied softly, "That subordinate of yours, Kai Buzi, was it? How much merit was recorded in the court for the last demonic creature he captured?" Dangjiang quickly replied, 300 immortal merits. "Oh," Shehui nodded lightly, "then this peacock should be worth around 350 immortal merits." Dangjiang quickly lifted his head. Though he had been living comfortably of late, he still remembered his promise to Kai Buzi to help him seek the Golden Core Great Tao. The matter had been weighing on his mind, and he'd been waiting for a chance to consult immortal official Liu. But Liu never returned, and that connection turned it out to be hollow. Now, with the matter growing urgent, Dangjiang could only ask Shehui. He hesitated as he said, "My subordinate cultivates the Purple Mansion Golden Core Tao, pursuing self-refinement. He has already passed the Purple Mansion threshold and lacks only the final Tao lineage, but the pristine water fruition attainment under that Tao is already held by someone else in the mortal realm." Shehui reacted quickly, already forming a few guesses as she asked, "So there is someone. Likely, the one who holds that fruition attainment is unwilling to let him attain the Tao. That makes things troublesome. He might as well begin with metallic essence instead. What is the state of pristine water?" Dangjiang shook his head. Not good. He's currently engaged in a duel beyond the outer heavens and cannot be disturbed. That's why I'm anxious. Whether we proceed to attain the final purifying dew or seek a hint from the Supreme Yin or abandon this Tao altogether, we must decide now. Once that true monarch returns, there won't be many ways left open. I see. Xie Yui seemed intrigued. Though her former self had been a low-ranked demonic creature at the early Purple Mansion realm, born from a wisp of lesser yin, and retained traces of immortal arts in her memory, resolving such matters was far from easy. She asked, since he's your subordinate, why not ask Zhenggao? Even if pristine water lies within the mortal realm, there may well be heavenly generals under that same Tao, you could inquire. I'd like to, my lady. But Dangjiang could hardly leave his post. 10-15 days would often pass without him seeing a single soul. Even if he wanted to replace the 2 attendants in his courtyard with female servants, there was nowhere to find them, let alone anyone to ask. Kai Buzi, oh Kai Buzi, your cultivation Tao truly is a dead end. Xie Yui clearly understood as well. After a brief moment, she said, then arrange a meeting with Zhenggao and seek his counsel properly. It may cost a good deal, but Zhenggao is a man with a cold face and a kind heart, and his cultivation is deep. He won't make things difficult for you. But someone as insignificant as I, how could I ever find a way to seek out such a lord? At Dangjiang's question, Xie Yui nodded and said, I happen to be heading to the Supreme Yin Court myself this time. Since you've asked, you can come along when the time comes. Overjoyed at having found a way, Dangjiang thanked her profusely. A vast grand hall appeared once again as he stood waiting atop the clouds, with 12 white jade bridges arcing through the air, spanning across a golden lake. Xie Yui descended from the clouds, and they made their way deeper into the hall until they reached the courtyard outside. Dangjiang could already see the 2 attendant girls still standing outside the courtyard from afar. The one who had previously held a white-edged jade pipa now carried a pure cloud jade bottle, while the other held a flower basket. When they noticed his gaze, they returned it with courteous bows. Dangjiang strode toward the courtyard, keeping his eyes straight ahead. Xie Yui stopped behind him. Out of the corner of his eye, Dangjiang caught a glimpse of the maid's basket, filled with glistening fruits, each one the kind of treasure that could bankrupt a man. Afraid that Xie Yui might recall the matter of the golden branch of laurel he still owed her, Dangjiang all but fled into the courtyard. The 4 lantern pillars within shone brightly, and the round pool at the center had turned into a milky white hue. He quickly formed a hand seal and activated the command token. Manifest. Chapter 12:22, Seeking Tao II. A man in blue robes appeared above the pool. Dangjiang still looked somewhat distracted, while Kai Buzi stepped out from within the pool, glanced around, and frowned when he saw that the fool standing bemused by the edge. What are you dazed about? Dangjiang snorted in laughter and shook his head as he said, You suddenly demanded that so-called gift last time. Don't think you're not going to repay me for it. He had suffered a great loss that time and had brooded over it ever since. He had complained about it to Kai Buzi 2 years ago, who had taken it as a joke. Hearing it again now, Kai Buzi merely laughed and replied, You deserved it. He hadn't come to argue with Dangjiang though. Before the other could flare up, he furrowed his brow and said, I've already captured that peacock for you. What about your end? Is there any news? Dangjiang raised his brows and glanced over Kai Buzi. He noticed that the latter bore no wounds and his aura was immense with seemingly untouched mana. Though he was secretly impressed, his mouth was as sharp as ever as he said, With what little you've managed to catch, your efficiency is pathetic. Those few demonic creatures were mere small fry of the Purple Mansion realm. Take a good look at yourself before pestering me every day for news, won't you? Kai Buzi sneered coldly. Oh please, you with your empty-handed scheming. If I catch another one for you, it's out of generosity. So do you have any news or not? What connections? Or were you just bragging? Dangjiang immediately lost his temper and he snapped, You ungrateful fool. Do you even know how I've schemed and maneuvered all these years, negotiating favors day and night without rest? How much I've spent from my own purse just to secure you an audience with an immortal general, and this is the thanks I get. At that, Kai Buzi lifted his brows slightly and said in surprise, An audience with an immortal general. Kai Buzi didn't believe for a moment that this fool had any grand strategy in mind. 2 years ago, when they corresponded, Dangjiang had been vague and clearly uncertain. He had likely made no progress at all. Now, hearing him boast about careful planning, Kai Buzi guessed he must have stumbled upon some stroke of dumb luck. If he's truly arranged it, that's good enough. I'll meet this immortal general first, and then perhaps throw the fool a few words of praise. Kai Buzi feigned a look of astonishment and offered a few reluctant words of thanks. Sure enough, Dangjiang burst out laughing as he swelled with pride. After chatting for a while, Dangjiang suddenly seemed to recall something and said, still holding on to his grudge, Have you managed to find immortal official Li yet? This was something Dang Jiang had already instructed him about earlier, but unlike the Golden Core Dao lineage, this matter had no definite leads. Kai Buzi, being far more capable than Dang Jiang, merely laughed. What if I find him? What if I don't? Am I supposed to tell him outright about reincarnation? If that messes up the higher plans, will they punish you or me? That single retort left Dang Jiang speechless, but he truly did not want to keep slaving away every day. After a long sigh, he said, in any case, look for him. If he retains any memory, help me inquire a bit. It was utter nonsense to Kai Buzi, but he still remembered the information clearly in his heart. Through which family had he, Kai Buzi, first come into contact with the heavens and Dang Jiang, the Li family of Moongaze? And what was Moongaze Lake? It was once the foothold of the Moonlight Origin Mansion. Everything in the heavens was tied, one way or another, to the Supreme Yin. Even if it bore little resemblance to the Moonlight Origin Mansion or Donghua, heaven as recorded in texts, the connection could not be denied. If this immortal official Li had indeed been ordered to reincarnate under his original name, then Kai Buzi's first thought was none other than Taoist Master Donghua, Li Jiangquan himself. Taoist Master Donghua fit the picture too perfectly, possessing transcendent mastery in spell arts, astonishing sword intent and formidable cultivation, all while carrying the title of the Moonlight Origin Mansion. How deep did these waters run? Though the Kai family had once been involved, Kai Buzi himself, an unregistered golden core, had never received the full story, and he wasn't foolish enough to dig further. Thus he brushed the matter aside with a few words. Dang Jiang then lifted his chin proudly and said, first, I'll take you to meet my superior, the fairy of the Wugui Lesser Yin. Do try to tidy up that rustic air of yours so you don't taint her immortal grace. Kai Buzi, eager to meet more people, followed him through the courtyard. Dang Jiang drew a command token from his sleeve, placed it in Kai Buzi's hand and said, you have no immortal registry, so you'll need to carry this token. There will be many great figures along the way, so don't go staring about carelessly. That caught Kai Buzi off guard. By all logic, since Yings had been absent for so many years, and even neglected the mirrored mirage grotto heaven of Green Pine Temple, there should have been fewer great cultivators in this place. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent this fool Dang Jiang to receive him. After a moment's hesitation, he followed Dang Jiang out of the courtyard, and indeed saw a woman in a tea-white gown waiting outside. She had a peepa cradled in her arms, and a pale round mark glowed faintly between her brows as she lifted her gaze toward them. Greetings, lady of the Wugui Lesser Yin. Kai Buzi bowed respectfully, and in that instant, comprehension dawned in his heart. She's a great cultivator of the Lesser Yin, and her divine abilities are genuine. She's likely at the peak of the Purple Mansion realm. But before him, She Hui paused slightly, a flicker of doubt rising in her heart. How strange. The more I look at him, the more displeased I feel. His appearance isn't that annoying, so why does he irritate me so much? But her expression gave nothing away. After a single glance, she turned and strode ahead. Dang Jiang hurried after her, while Kai Buzi followed quietly. Though 2 rows of heavenly soldiers stood on either side, solemn and imposing, the man in blue did not spare them even a glance. Instead, his gaze lingered on the cultivators present. No matter how disciplined these guards look, they could just as easily be puppets or manifestations of some divine ability. Many cultivators paused to watch as he walked past, and a few of higher rank even exchanged greetings with She Hui. Kai Buzi cast them a sidelong glance and thought to himself, that fool's been putting on airs. Not a single person has paid him any mind. Together they arrived at a jade-white platform engraved with moon patterns. Snowflakes drifted through the air, and streams of spirit water circled them. After a short wait, a handsome immortal general in silver armor approached, and She Hui smiled. Fellow Taoist Zhenggao. Zhenggao lifted his brows, glanced her way, and nodded in acknowledgement. So, She Hui, you've come. They exchanged brief courtesies. She Hui, clearly not one for flattery, quickly shifted the topic and said, back then, when you entrusted Dang Jiang to my supervision, I meant to consult you on a few matters, partly to fulfill my duty as his superior, and partly because it concerns the affairs of the Supreme Yin. Zhenggao nodded with a faint smile, his gaze passing lightly over the 2 others as he listened to She Hui's account. Once she had finished, the fairy of Wugui Lesser Yin shook the sleeves of her tea-white robe and bowed, saying, I shall leave the matter to your judgment, immortal general. It is not suitable for me to remain here. She withdrew gracefully. Meanwhile, Dang Jiang remained below, waiting. Although he had met Zhenggao in private before, it had never been under such solemn and majestic circumstances. A quiet dread began to rise within him. Kai Buzi, in contrast, stayed calm. Yet the sheer rank of this place had already exceeded his expectations several times over, and since the matter touched upon his own golden core Dao, a faint tension stirred in his chest. Watching Dang Jiang stand frozen like a frightened turtle before the immortal general, he couldn't help but feel exasperated. Idiot. Chapter 12:23, Intercalary of Valley Water I. Kai Buzi waited for a few breaths before Danjiang finally stepped forward and bowed. Immortal General. This man was personally chosen by the Venerable One back then and permitted to ascend in pursuit of the Tao. Now that he has begun to accumulate immortal merits, he comes specially to pay his respects, hoping for your guidance so that he may one day aspire to form his golden core. He knelt down sincerely, discreetly tugging at Kai Buzi's sleeve to signal him to present the command token. Although Kai Buzi was a Purple Mansion realm cultivator of great status, he too dropped to his knees without hesitation, his expression calm and respectful. This humble cultivator has successively offered 2 demonic creatures in sacrifice to exchange for immortal merits as resources for my cultivation. Everything is recorded within this command token. I humbly ask for your guidance, my lord. Immediately an immortal soldier descended from the platform, received the command token from Kai Buzi, and delivered it to Lu Jiangxian, who had manifested as Zheng Gao. My lord, within it are 641 strands of immortal merit. Zheng Gao nodded slightly, glanced at the 2 of them and said, then seek the intercalary position. Danjiang could no longer quite understand what was being said, and even Kai Buzi hesitated. His Azure Pond sect pristine water Dao lineage was formidable enough to suppress other cultivators, but precisely because it originated from pristine water, his understanding of the golden core was surprisingly shallow. Though he had gathered much information over the years, he was far too shrewd not to seize such an opportunity to ask a few more questions. He immediately bowed in reply. My lord, this humble cultivator's Dao lineage is crude, my cultivation is shallow, and I am completely ignorant regarding the matter of the golden core. It is only by the grace of an immortal lord in Anhui heaven that I was granted the hope of advancement. What you have said is too profound. I beg your explanation. Lu Jiangxian quietly chuckled in his heart, so he's using me as his backing. He had studied countless scriptures and cultivated according to immortal formulas. His knowledge of the golden core, both in theory and in practice, far surpassed that of Kai Buzi, and he was quite confident in it. Such secrets could not be lightly passed on, yet Kai Buzi would never act without gain, and Lu Jiangxian, who intended to make further use of him, was not stingy. He said softly, in your current situation, that true monarch of pristine water cannot be removed, so you have no hope of fruition attainment. You know this well. Worse yet, you are a descendant of his Dao Li. Nij, and he is watching you closely, unwilling to even let you attain the surplus position. If you confront him directly along the Tao of pristine water, it will be nothing short of courting death. Only the intercalary position remains open to you. Kai Buzi's breathing suddenly grew heavy, and he whispered, this humble cultivator dares to ask, my lord, which intercalary position must I attain? Both the surplus position and intercalary position were utterly obscure and beyond reach for ordinary cultivators. Even direct disciples of the Purple Mansion realm only knew of their existence, while the golden core Dao lineages of the 3 sects and 7 gates possessed no cultivation art or scripture that could explicitly instruct one on how to attain either the surplus or intercalary position. No matter how much he had seen before, Kai Buzi had never lost sight of what truly mattered. The answer to this question carried the weight of Mount Tai across the entire world. Its value was beyond imagination. Yet Zheng Gao acted as though he had heard the simplest of questions and shook his head. That depends on your divine abilities. There is an intercalation between pristine water and valley water. Of the 5 divine abilities, Spring's Echo, Heavy Murk, and Chaogui Hidden Form all belong to the intercalary of valley water, yet you chose to cultivate Clear Dusk Rain, and that brings trouble. Kai Buzi reacted swiftly. His face changed several times over as that calm statement sank in. Pristine water and valley water share an intercalation. What did that imply? It meant that Kai Buzi could use this relationship to seek the intercalary position of valley water. His expression, once as steady as Mount Tai, finally cracked, revealing astonished enlightenment. Bewilderment and comprehension surged and intertwined in his eyes. Kai Buzi had long harbored theories regarding valley water and mansion water from his cultivation experience and the ancient texts he had gathered. In the past, he had even speculated that Yings was a true monarch of mansion water and had taken desperate measures to prove his loyalty. Now that he knew there existed divine abilities tied to the intercalation of valley water, more than half the fog in his mind dispersed. Yet merely knowing that pristine water and valley water were intercalated was not the key. The real question lay in which immortal foundation should be used to fill the gap, and what method could lead to forming the golden core. Countless thoughts surfaced in his mind, but relying on his cultivation insight, he suppressed his excitement and replied, in generations past, the seniors of our Dao lineage sought only the surplus position of pristine water, never daring to dream of an intercalary position. By the time it came to my generation, I had already discerned the true monarch's intent and pondered pursuing the intercalary position. but I never thought that clear dusk rain would ruin everything. Zheng Gao had picked up a jade slip and was reading it casually as he replied, had you not cultivated clear dusk rain, the affinity with the Valley Water Dao would have been marvelous. But clear dusk rain is a late-coming rain, the proper fruition of pristine water, and therefore incompatible with valley water. Kai Buzi finally understood. The Kai family already possessed heavy murk and Spring's Echo. Only clear dusk rain had come from the Azure Pond Sex archive. Suspicious by nature, he immediately blamed pristine water in his heart and said softly, now, I beseech you, my lord, to show me the path through this confusion. Zheng Gao rubbed the command token in his hand, and its light instantly dimmed. Dang Jiang looked on in distress, but Kai Buzi remained utterly unconcerned, waiting respectfully as Zheng Gao spoke. There exists a divine ability called Morning Cold Rain in the Mansion Water lineage. Do you know of it? Of course Kai Buzi knew. Without a moment's hesitation, he answered, this humble one has heard of it. Morning Cold Rain of Mansion Water often manifests over the Eastern Sea, and many descendants of pristine water demonic creatures practice this Tao. Zheng Gao spoke softly, if you are to attain divine ability, you should cultivate this Tao. Kai Buzi was slightly stunned, unease rising in his heart. After all, if a Purple Mansion Realm cultivator attained the wrong divine ability, it would mean certain stagnation. The Purple Mansion Realm cultivators in Jiangnan would only use their final divine ability to patch their Tao, and even then they would calculate endlessly to avoid any conflict among their powers. It was no simple matter. Moreover, it was pure absurdity to think that a pristine water cultivator could use the divine ability of Mansion Water to attain the intercalary position of Valley Water. Had he heard such a claim earlier, Kai Buzi would have slapped the speaker to dust without hesitation. He could not comprehend it at all until Zheng Gao raised his brows and said, Morning Cold Rain. When falling snow meets the light of dawn, it turns into a sharp cold rain. The rain dwells within the snow that serves as its valley. Thus, it forms the intercalation of valley water within Mansion Water. Moreover, it can connect above with the 3 valley water intercalations and below with clear dusk rain. Though not as ideal as using the other 2 valley water Daos, it still forms a viable Dao. The more Kai Buzi listened, the more sense it made. He quickly nodded, a trace of trust rising in his heart. At the very least, this method still involved 4 pristine water divine abilities, and it remained within the bounds of worldly logic. Even if there was no chance of striking for Golden Core, his life would be secure. Kai Buzi instead felt that skipping clear dusk rain to cultivate 3 pristine water Daos and then 2 valley water Daos would be nothing short of a joke. The elders in the various scriptures have long made clear that cultivating even one divine ability outside metallic essence would result in your progress halting. Cultivate 2, even if you manage to, how many days could you last before your body explodes and you die? He privately thought that even if both paths lay before him, he would still choose 4 pristine water divine abilities and 1 Mansion Water divine ability. In fact, he was glad he had already cultivated clear dusk rain, otherwise it would have been harder to refuse. He then said, this morning cold rain. Chapter 12:24, Intercalary of Valley Water, II. Kai Buzi did possess Mansion Water techniques, but he was completely ignorant about the mysteries of intercalation and surplus. Naturally, he wanted to ask for confirmation, but what he truly hoped was that the other party would provide a tailored cultivation art. His tone was both hopeful and eager. Wu Jiangxian had been waiting for that very question. Having already prepared the bait, he knew Kai Buzi would consume it willingly. He controlled Zheng Gao's manifestation, smiling as he said, that is simple. Morning Cold Rain is after all a Mansion Water art. It would be best to modify it slightly so that it fits your Dao more closely. If you have enough immortal merits, you can request a copy from the court itself. The later method for seeking the Golden Core is the same. It will not be difficult. These words stirred Kai Buzi's heart. Lu Jiangxian, knowing how formidable he was, felt a flicker of concern. After all, writing a new cultivation art took time, and he feared that Kai Buzi might go to extremes and sacrifice an entire mountain to the Merciful One, only for him to be unable to deliver. With his current strength, even composing a Golden Core method was an empty promise. He quickly added with feigned regret, I must remind you, the other colleagues in the court are not as easygoing as I am. They hold little regard for the Purple Mansion Golden Core Dao. Best not to go there yourself. Let Dangjiang handle the requests. The cost will be steep, so make the effort count. It was a reasonable explanation. Kai Buzi even felt some of his doubts dissipate, and his suspicion eased. After bowing respectfully with Dangjiang, he withdrew from the platform. The man in blue looked utterly refreshed, brimming with vitality. Dangjiang, however, looked down at the command token in his hand. Only 41 of the 641 strands of immortal merit remained. Kai Buzi didn't seem to care in the least. What a joke, just the lives of 2 demonic creatures. Yet that single phrase, that pristine water and valley water are intercalated, is worth more than the lives of countless Purple Mansion realm cultivators in an entire Dao lineage. Xiaohui was waiting outside, peeper in hand, perpetually displeased by Kai Buzi's manner, yet she patiently escorted him out without complaint. Once they reached the courtyard, both finally breathed out in relief. This time Dang Jiang stayed on guard, and Kai Buzi didn't mention any gifts. He said gravely, "When I return, I will slowly begin accumulating immortal merits. Doing too much at once would arouse suspicion. The path ahead is one where body and soul could perish at any moment. It's like walking on thin ice. If I fall, your road to promotion will vanish as well. You're safe up here in heaven. Please help me inquire about how valuable the methods are. If there's a chance, gather some spirit pills and wondrous medicines for me. Such aid benefits you as well." "Do you really need to tell me that?" Dang Jiang spat at him. Kai Buzi nearly cursed "stupid donkey" in return but held back, vanishing into the round pool. Dang Jiang looked after him with a trace of envy, took a step forward, and suddenly felt something off. "Damn it, that Kai dog hunts demonic creatures and earns 300 immortal merits each time, and I don't even make a fraction of that. How come I don't get any cut at all? How can the ones below do all the work, without taking at least 60 or 70% for themselves?" Palace of Radiant Purity, Supreme Yin. Snow whirled in the air as Lu Jiangxian slowly manifested beside a table. A jade flask filled with a shimmering blue-white liquid, vast as the starry sea and radiating divine brilliance, stood in the middle. Kai Buzi has mostly taken the bait. This will let him cultivate to the peak of the Purple Mansion realm. With 200 years still ahead of him, he'll serve well enough as a hidden card. Lu Jiangxian was not truly deceiving him. According to his own calculations, if the method of seeking the golden core aligned correctly, this Dao, though strange and arduous, was still a narrow road that led straight to golden core. This cultivation art of morning cold rain isn't difficult either. Back then, Kai Buzi broke through by relying on talisman qi, proving that talisman qi is indeed inseparable from divine abilities. Furthermore, it can even sense and nurture them. As long as it's written up to the foundation establishment realm, the process becomes far simpler. Lu Jiangxian possessed plenty of gray talismans and still had 7 white ones in reserve. Although the sacrificial ritual method was not recorded, the efficacy of these 2 kinds of talisman qi should differ greatly. Kai Buzi is formidable. When the time comes, I'll grant him a gray talisman and let him slowly grind his way through. The white talisman I'll reserve for that Li Ziming fellow, so he can complete his sovereign in peril faster and won't be beaten into constant retreat. He molded several human figures and tested them repeatedly. As long as the Purple Mansion realm was achieved, the talisman qi could indeed resonate with the previous divine ability and aid in the gestation of the next. Li Ziming's heaven-venerating gate is still incomplete. It will be quite some time before it becomes useful. He gathered his thoughts and observed for a while, but everything outside regarding Kai Buzi appeared normal. Then, with a flick of his sleeve, a small, exquisite peacock with golden beak and claws appeared upon the ground, its feathers shimmering in 7 colors. This peacock's true body should have been as vast as a mountain, but he had compressed and sealed it into a tiny form within the mirror world. Lu Jiangxian glanced twice and roughly assessed it. Far inferior to Fuyu, both body and soul are flawed. Though its true spirit was forcibly drawn into the mirror, it possesses not a shred of divine ability. It can serve as mediocre material, but it's dreadfully dull to use. Those called the Merciful Ones were filled only with scriptures. Their spells meant nothing outside the Buddhist lands. All that remained were a few of the peacock's innate abilities and instincts. Even if one were resurrected to record spells, it would still be a dull-witted mediocrity. He gently lifted his hand, and the peacock transformed into a wisp of multicolored light, soaring upward and converging in his palm into a thumbnail-sized 7-hued glazed sphere. Lu Jiangxian had originally planned to extract a soul to pair with Fuyu's lesser yin divine ability to refine the talisman qi, but the Merciful One had no divine abilities, only cultivation. The lesser yin art still had some uses, so he simply decided to consume the entire peacock. Come! The entire celestial palace froze. Every heavenly soldier and general turned to stone where they stood. Golden incense power erupted in torrents beneath the vast palace, spanning the heavens and streaming toward the 7-colored glazed orb in his hand. The golden lake that Dang Jiang and the others had seen beneath the 12 jade bridges was merely a corner of the water body. The incense offerings from millions of mortals had, year after year, formed a vast golden lake beneath the palace, and it was now diminishing at a terrifying pace. Never before had Lu Jiangxian experienced such drain when condensing talisman qi. He had never even considered whether he had sufficient incense power. Now, the consumption for a single azure talisman soared from tens of thousands to millions. It was only because of 5 decades of ceaseless accumulation that the Golden Lake's surface slowly sank yet endured. Faint azure radiance emerged before him as countless profound patterns spread through the air like a spider web. Immortal bells and string music echoed out from nowhere. The newly formed talisman Qi wavered lightly, as though curiously examining its surroundings. Lu Jiangxian casually caught it and pressed it into his palm. All the phenomena vanished. Beneath his feet, the softly rippling Golden Lake was left only half its former depth. All is ready. Once the Li family's sacrifice is complete, I can bestow the talisman seeds without delay. Chapter 12:25 Nine Mounds I. Pale light reappeared within the pitch-black cavern as ripple ease spread across the azure pool on the ground. The young man opened his eyes, and everything that had been blurred gradually came back into focus. Drip. Kai Buzi lifted his brows slightly and stood silently where he was. His eyes still held a mixture of disbelief and delight. He looked around the cavern as if waking from a dream, hands folded into his sleeves. The intercalary position of Valley Water. He stood there dazed for a long time, still feeling like the few questions he had asked Zhenggao were worth far more than the lives of 2 Purple Mansion realm demonic creatures. One sentence, pristine water and valley water are intercalated, and another, cultivate morning cold rain to seek the intercalary position of valley water. What kind of privilege was that? Even among the Wang and Zai families, or even the Luoxia dragon clan, do they enjoy such treatment? When the scions of those powers reach a bottleneck and personally visit a true monarch, can they receive such direct guidance? 4 pristine waters and 1 mansion water combined to seek valley water. What an astonishing concept. Yet it had sounded as casual as idle chatter after tea from that immortal General Zhenggao's mouth. What kind of cultivation insight was that? What sort of Dao lineage inheritance? Could any other true monarch have reached such a deduction so easily? Kai Buzi's expression shifted as he thought, impossible. Even the true monarchs of today, after cultivating for so many years, have only produced jade true. My determination to pursue the Dao may be firm, yet ordinary Golden Core realm cultivators could never possess such a power to turn decay into wonder. The gap was far too vast. For a moment Kai Buzi even doubted what kind of place the outer heavens truly were, and whether other realms even existed. If everything he had witnessed was real, then the being commanding such a terrifying heavenly palace must rule this world as easily as a child's game. Kai Buzi was suspicious by nature and never indulged in idle fantasies. Instead, he sought the most reasonable explanation and thought to himself, such insight into Dao lineages must come from a middle-age heritage at the very least. He sorted out his thoughts, gradually grasping the crux of the matter as his eyes narrowed slightly. Those words might have been intentionally instructive. A Golden Core realm cultivator, whose Dao lineage borders that of valley and pristine waters, might conceive of such an idea. But thinking of it is one thing, producing a genuine Golden Core method is another. That Golden Core method would also be anything but simple. No 5-element seeking gold or voidreality seeking gold will suffice. All those ancient orthodox arts are useless. What's required is one personally tailored to me. To craft such a method, so absurd and dreamlike, would be harder than forming the core myself. It was only Zhenggao's words that gave him enough confidence to believe even a little. The joy and anxiety in his heart subsided as calm composure rose to the fore. The Golden Core method isn't in my hands yet. It would be best to keep a measure of doubt. For now, I should continue capturing demonic creatures. Since there's nothing to cultivate at the moment, I may as well hunt these creatures. I'll get that cultivation art first and see for myself. In excellent spirits, he rode the wind upward and burst from the sea. The world felt vast and open, and the sea breeze crisp and clean. Lifting his gaze to the distance, he saw the heavens and stars glittering one by one. One must always plan ahead. I'll make a trip to Shiki, visit the various Dao lineages, leave a good impression with that madam, and study more of the Valley Water Dao collections. At the end of the sea. The island continued to bake beneath a scorching sun. Not a trace of moisture lingered above the sea. Instead, a stifling heat pressed down. The sky stretched endlessly blue and cloudless, so bright and clean that the crops across the island had wilted under its glare. Upon a great rock by the shore sat a man dressed in a white gold Taoist robe. A faint heavenly light shimmered between his brows as he quietly gazed at the sky. After capturing a demonic creature and refining an essence-gathering pill, Li Ziming had sent Xia Xiaoyu into seclusion. He secluded himself at the end of the sea for 3 years, taking 2 true profound quintessence-gathering pills while he continued to diligently cultivate. He had completely suppressed the flames within his juke acupoint. His injuries were now 90% healed. The few remaining surface wounds were merely burns from a battle of spells. It would be easily mended in due time, and his return to peak condition would be effortless. Only one of the 7 true profound quintessence-gathering pills remained. Li Ziming tucked it carefully into his robes for emergencies. If I weren't an alchemist myself, I'd still be stuck, hiding in that wretched place, and who knows, I may have to duel that unscrupulous old fiend again one day. Best to keep this one pill. If I get struck by his spell again, it might just save the day. With most of his wounds healed and Xia Xiaoyu having broken through to the Foundation establishment realm, Li Ziming decided it was time to leave the end of the sea and head for Peacock Sea. The dry fire immortal foundation is complete. Rain clouds disperse and cold turns to heat, just as the text described. Li Ziming's insight was no longer shallow. Since White Thorn Heart corresponded to dry fire, the thorn must be tied to the Luinbird lineage. The Luin controlled fire, with dry fire as its sovereign element, meaning White Thorn Heart's strength should not be underestimated. His timing was precise. After 2 more breaths, brilliant light burst from the island temple and crimson flames soared skyward, accompanied by the clear, melodious cries of birds. The chirping drew closer as the white and crimson flames streaked through the air, transforming into a graceful young woman with a rosy complexion and slender arched brows. Smiling faintly, she knelt before him in a reverent salute and said, "Xiaoyu pays respects to the Taoist master. I have not failed your expectations. My Tao foundation is complete, and your precious pill has not been wasted." Li Ziming smiled and nodded, raising his hand to lift her up. It is not solely the pill's merit. Few could cultivate so diligently in such desolation and reach the qi cultivation realm early. Further, meeting me shows your fate is blessed indeed. Xia Xiaoyu nodded repeatedly as Li Ziming continued, "Let's look around the temple together. Once you've settled matters here, we'll set off for home." Xia Xiaoyu's heart filled with excitement. She immediately bowed again and replied, "Your grace and kindness, my lord. I shall remember them always and never forget." The end of the sea lay countless mortal oceans away from the eastern sea's edge where Peacock Sea lay. Even as a Foundation establishment realm cultivator, Xia Xiaoyu would need years, or perhaps decades, to cross by flight. Moreover, once she reached the coast, the 9 Mounds immortal mountain might ignore her, but the peacock surely would not let her go. Though life at the end of the sea was free, and she could easily dominate the region, her cultivation would eventually stagnate and wither away. The prosperous inland seas and the Unison Sea were worlds away, and before her stood a purple mansion realm cultivator, a true mountain to rely on. Li Ziming had already walked forward. Master and disciple reached the temple gates, where rows of people were kneeling in reverence. He did not enter but spoke casually, "Take care of everything." Chapter 12:26, 9 Mounds, II. Xia Xiaoyu immediately bowed and stepped inside. Immediately a cacophony of voices rang out, "My lord" to the left, "Honored mistress" to the right, and shouts of reverence that shook the air. At times old men wept with joy, at others middle-aged folk pleaded in despair. Soon cries of reluctant farewell whose meanings were hard to grasp followed. Chaos reigned for a full 15 minutes. There were chickens flying and dogs scrambling, until all was silent again. Xia Xiaoyu hurried out and respectfully reported, "Taoist master, all matters in the temple have been settled. A drought of 3 months harmed the people during my breakthrough. I have left the resources bestowed by you with the temple to send men to purchase rice and compensate the villagers." It was clear Xia Xiaoyu had sensed something of Li Ziming's stance. Her act served both as a test of his temperament and a final gesture of restitution toward her temple. Li Ziming saw through it and nodded slightly. Then the two rose upon threads of heavenly light and flew toward the horizon. Still kneeling, Xia Xiaoyu could only faintly see through the shifting veil of heavenly light. The crowd below was still kneeling, bowing again and again. Her heart was heavy with mixed feelings. Then, as darkness like spreading ink bled across her vision, heaven and earth went utterly black. The Great Void. As they traversed the Great Void, Li Ziming spoke, "You've done well. I cultivate in Jiangnan among the immortal families, and our name carries weight in the orthodox Tao. You're clever and perceptive, but when you enter the family, you must leave behind those outer-sea habits of conduct." Relieved, Xia Xiaoyu bowed deeply. Li Ziming casually reached into his storage pouch, drew out a robe embroidered with Moon Lake patterns along with a pair of silver boots, and tossed them into her hands. "We're about to meet some guests." Her garments were a mismatched patchwork and hardly fit for formal company. Though the robe was not a Dharma robe, it was fine, supple spirit cloth, costly and elegant, matching well with the silver boots. As she touched the fabric, affection welled in her heart. Tusk. This fabric, this spiritual qi, it must be genuine Jiangnan work. She draped the robe over herself, silently admiring its texture and aura, not daring to interrupt him. Li Ziming, meanwhile, moved through the Great Void in deep thought. The 9 Mounds immortal mountain, yes, it's worth visiting. The Tantai family, they are friends of Si Boxiu, whom I first visited back in the day. My relations with the Sima family are fairly cordial at the moment. The Tantai family is also well connected to the inland seas, and their news is reliable. There's no harm in meeting them. Having settled on his destination, he traveled for a short while through the great void before breaking through its veil. The sea beneath his feet gleamed with hues of bronze green and iridescent red. It was unmistakably the Peacock Sea. Xia Xiaoyu, who could not comprehend the workings of the great void, was stunned speechless by their speed. Li Ziming, however, grew wary as he saw flocks of peacocks darting frantically through the sky. He immediately concealed his presence and thought, "What's wrong with this flock of peacocks? They're flying about like they've lost their matriarch." He slipped into the great void once again. Though he didn't know the exact location of the 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain, he flew toward the most turbulent region within the void and emerged again into the mortal world. Sure enough, a vast mountain range rose from the sea, towering above the waves in majestic grandeur. The entire range glowed with a purplish red hue, its slopes blanketed in maple trees rarely seen in the outer seas. The sea breeze stirred the foliage into crimson waves. Li Ziming cast a single glance over them before descending to the foot of the mountain. Before him stood a colossal mountain gate, over 330 meters tall and entirely white. Bold characters were carved in grandeur on the right side, the great path of sublime unity and truth. On the left, the mountain of pure moon and spirit ease. Li Ziming glanced toward the center, where characters gleamed in gold, the 9 Taos of Supreme Mound. Just as various sects recognized the Li family as part of the Wei's Li Dao lineage, aligned against the Taos of radiant essence, each Tao lineage sought to trace its roots as far back as possible. Such names carried immense significance, and Li Ziming took careful note of them. At that moment, a cultivator flew out from the mountain, eyes showing mild surprise, and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Taoist master. I am Tantai Mumming of the 9 Mounds Tao lineage. I did not know an immortal had arrived. Pardon my failure to welcome you sooner. Please enter the mountain and rest for a while." Li Ziming had heard at both the end of the sea and the Peacock Sea that the masters of 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain were known for their hospitality and wide circle of acquaintances. Tantai Mumming clearly had experience with grand figures. His reception was smooth and unhurried, and his momentary astonishment was simply because he did not recognize Li Ziming. Behind him, Xia Xiaoyu was still awed by the towering mountain and colossal gate. Yet with the Taoist master standing before her as a pillar of strength, she felt little inferiority, only pride. Straightening her back, she calmly stepped forward, careful not to bring shame upon Li Ziming. Li Ziming nodded slightly and replied, "So this is the cultivation place of Taoist Master Tantai. I have long heard his esteemed name. The last time I conversed with Senior Yuan Ziu, he spoke highly of him. Since I was passing through the Peacock Sea for some leisure, I thought it fitting to pay a visit." Li Ziming did not give his own name, yet Tantai Mumming looked pleasantly surprised and nodded. He said, "So you are a friend of Taoist Master Yuan Ziu. How discourteous of me. Please rest in the pavilion while I invite my elders." Although Li Ziming spoke familiarly, Tantai Mumming remained cautious and did not hastily grant him entry. He sent word to the elders instead and offered a polite apology. "A few days ago, the great Boon bronze-colored temple in the north caused a disturbance. Our grand Taoist master was invited to the Bronze Mountain to discuss important matters with the peacocks and has not yet returned. However, our Taoist master Lingdu is within the sect, currently debating the Tao with Taoist master Hufu. They've been at it for 3 months now. I'll send someone to inform them." Li Ziming's eyes lit up as he thought, Taoist master Hufu is here too. Taoist master Hufu was of the great Ziyuqi temple, a temple known for its upright conduct and unentangled relations with the Li family. He had even attended Li Ziming's celebration years ago. Knowing that Hufu was present gave Li Ziming greater confidence. It only took a few breaths for 2 Taoist masters to approach through the air. The elder in front, Oped and holding a wooden staff, was clearly Lingdu. Behind him, tall and thin, dressed in ritual robes, was the familiar Hufu. As they drew near, Lingdu looked slightly puzzled and said, "Greetings, sir." Li Ziming returned a genial smile, but Hufu recognized him immediately. He stepped forward, forcing a faint, awkward grin. He said, "Senior Lingdu, this is the Taoist master from Jiangnan, Zhejiang." Taoist master Hufu seldom traveled to Jiangnan, but when he did, he traveled grandly, with gongs sounding and spirit steeds pulling his chariot. The Li family had once sent congratulations for such an occasion. Li Ziming quickly bowed and smiled. "Greetings, Senior Hufu. I hadn't expected to find you here. What a delightful surprise." Though Hufu was technically of the same generation as Li Ziming, the latter's courteous address made his smile broaden a little. He replied, "You flatter me. Zhejiang, you've done quite well." Li Ziming caught the hint. Hufu was alluding to the fact that he had survived unscathed from his encounter with the grand Taoist master Cheng Xiao. Yet Li Ziming knew better than most how much of that had been luck. He deflected the praise with a smile, while Elder Lingdu examined him up and down in surprise and said admiringly, "So it is the Imperial Scion, Zheajing. I am Cao Zian of 9 Mounds Immortal Dao, titled Lingdu. An honor to meet you, Taoist master." "I dare not accept the title of Imperial Scion, merely a rumor spread through Jiangnan." Li Ziming hastily declined, but Lingdu's smile said he didn't quite believe it. Lifting his sleeve in welcome, he said, "Please, Zheajing, this way." The three of them rode the wind into the mountain. Cool breezes carried falling maple leaves across the slopes. A bronze chessboard stood beneath the tallest tree. The black and white stones were clashing fiercely, the game clearly mid-battle. Li Ziming felt a flicker of unease and glanced at it. "All these years, and I've never once touched a chess piece. Heaven forbid they ask me to play." Fortunately, Lingdu promptly moved the board aside. Hufu stood behind him with hands clasped behind his back, smiling as he said, "Zheajing, you've been quite the elusive one these past 2 years. I just asked the senior lady. Lady Tinglin has been looking everywhere for you. She questioned my great Ziyuqi temple and even came to 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain, all in her haste to find you." Chapter 12:27, Old Tales of the Peacock Eye. "Tinglin is still looking for me." Li Ziming did not believe Tinglin's concern was out of care. Almost certainly, she was only anxious to use the pill and worried that he might stay in seclusion for over a decade. "After all, I have already studied the heavenly quintessence-expelling pill, and the matter of profound peak gate has been settled. She took away the purple mansion realm formation, but with the materials in her hands, she probably feels embarrassed to ask others to refine it." He sat down with the two and asked, "I promised fellow Taoist Tinglin I would discuss an important matter with her. I was away for several years, delaying things, so she came looking for me." Li Ziming helped Tinglin cover up the alchemy matter and brushed it off casually. Hufu merely nodded and brewed tea, while Lingdu was much more enthusiastic. The old man laughed and said, "Zheajing is highly skilled in alchemy. Perhaps she seeks you for pill refinement. Either way, it is a good thing. I thought Zheajing was gravely injured earlier and in seclusion, so I only told her I would look into it. Now that I see Zheajing safe and sound, I no longer know how to reply to her." Lingdu had no wish to get involved in Purple Smoke Gate's affairs and wanted a definite answer from Li Ziming. Understanding his intent, Li Ziming replied, "There is no need for you, senior, to trouble yourself with replies. If I can return to Jiangnan, I will naturally seek her out myself." Tinglin belonged to the supreme Yang Dao lineage, and the great Ziyuqi temple was no minor power. It had once been under an immortal mansion. The 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain lay in the outer sea, and none of these factions cared to curry favor with her. Their relations were purely personal, and since no one had close ties with Tinglin, the matter was allowed to pass. Li Ziming took the chance to ask, "I have been recuperating in the Eastern Sea for several years and heard little from Jiangnan. I wonder how things stand now." Hufu disliked speaking much, fearing that too much explanation would lower his stature. He sipped his tea in silence, so Lingdu answered, "Zhugong has entered Shanji Prefecture and established a new mountain gate called Grace Covenant Gate, also of the Tongxuan Dao lineage. As for your family's Li Zhaowei, he fled into the sea, and I heard your family lost a cultivator skilled in thunder arts." Li Ziming lowered his gaze, set down his teacup, and unconsciously rubbed his hands against his robe before answering, "Oh, sigh." The joy he had felt from recovering his injuries instantly faded, leaving an emptiness within. Cheng Hui left behind no heirs, all because I planned poorly. He should have been the one to uphold our family's fortune, yet due to my lack of foresight, he died so meaninglessly. There were only a few true pillars in the family, and even fewer without selfish motives. Li Ziming knew every one of them clearly. Bitterness welled within him. The fact that he did not lose his composure was already commendable, yet he could not speak for a while. Lingdu, an experienced man, could tell at a glance that the junior that had perished had been cherished. He shook his head slightly and said, "Whether it's inheritance or bloodline, it's always the same. Out of 10 descendants, 6 are mediocre, 3 are wastrels, and the one outstanding must drag the rest forward. That alone is exhausting enough, but the more gifted they are, the more we push them into peril to temper themselves. As teachers and elders, we all hope that the one gifted child can turn the tide when disaster strikes. If they die in glory, it can at least be called a worthy death. But more often, they perish suddenly or die in vain accidents, leaving us stifled, powerless, and filled with both grief and fury." He stomped his foot and said, "When I was young, I had a junior with excellent innate ability and an honest temperament. If he was still alive, he could have already attempted to reach the Purple Mansion realm. Yet he let his guard down during a simple trip to a seaside market and died on a woman's belly, without even using a single talisman or protective treasure. Later investigation showed it wasn't because the boy lacked wit. That woman was merely a rogue cultivator, not under any divine ability. She simply turned love into hatred, hating his fickle heart. It shows that even we elders, with all our divine abilities, are helpless when fate runs out. Li Ziming said softly, "Senior speaks true. My child too is rather fond of romance. It may not be a bad thing, one must see whether he's clever or not, but his innate ability is not high, so his path ahead will be harder." Among the three, only Hufu was still young and childless. The great Ziyuqi temple was far from his concern, so he should have had little to worry about. Yet when the topic arose, his brows furrowed tightly as he replied, "Taoist Master Cao only has to worry about his own juniors, but my Tao lineage has troubles of its own. The inheritance in our hands has grown unsteady. Not only do the disciples resent their senior brothers, they have even started resenting their teachers. There are over 50 factions among the 36 peaks, each busy promoting their own kin. It's more than a tangled mess. After so many years of cultivation, even my own disciples have split into 6 factions." The other two offered a few words of comfort. Li Ziming, sensing further grief would be impropriety, composed himself. Hufu glanced at Lingdu, and the elder of the 9 Mounds Dao lineage spoke with a smile. "Since Zheajing is here, it must be destiny. Zheajing, how fares your Dharma body after your duel with Cheng Xiao? Have you met the silver bottle?" Lingdu was not especially close to Li Ziming, and speaking of one's Dharma body was generally taboo. A more temperamental cultivator of the Purple Mansion realm might have turned hostile on the spot, but given Lingdu's status and Li Ziming's mild disposition, the latter merely frowned and said, "There are still minor injuries, and I have met the silver bottle, formidable indeed." Lingdu spoke in a deep tone, "The Daoxuan Dao lineage is formidable. Since the silver bottle was involved, Zheajing must not return to Jiangnan for the time being. Cheng Xiao will surely sense it." Li Ziming's heart trembled, and his pupils widened slightly. Why did I sense nothing? Li Ziming had suspected earlier that Cheng Xiao's divine ability had left a mark, yet he had found no trace whatsoever. He had even used the immortal mirror to investigate. Impossible, there must be something strange. How could it escape the immortal mirror's detection? That sinister thing might have guessed I possess a probing ability and deliberately refrained, blending truth and falsehood. Lingdu glanced at him and said, "None of us possess an divine ability, so we cannot see clearly. However, my 9 Mounds Dao lineage has a technique called the Hidden Refinement Pool, which can purify one's Dharma body." He paused slightly, and his intent became clear. "However, there is one matter I wish to discuss." Li Ziming raised his head slightly as Lingdu said softly, "The Purple Mansion realm's spiritual flames. I wonder if Zheajing might be interested." A faint spark lit in Li Ziming's heart, though his face remained calm as he said, "Oh, I wonder which one it is." "The most advanced art F. The Li family was undoubtedly the 6th grade Great Li White Radiance. This spell art was highly demanding. It could only be cultivated by those possessing the radiant fire of the Purple Mansion realm. Li Ziming had coveted it for a long time. When he asked about it, Lingdu was momentarily stumped and replied in a low voice, "I'm not sure which one exactly, but it is neither virile fire nor dry fire." Having just escaped great danger, Li Ziming hesitated and asked, "Perhaps you should explain it in detail." Lingdu nodded. "Zheajing must have heard that something has happened at the Great Boon Bronze Color Temple, and unrest is spreading everywhere. Before my Grand Taoist Master departed, he speculated that one of the temple's merciful ones had fallen." Li Ziming had indeed found this puzzling. The Grand Taoist Master of the 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain was a cultivator of the late Purple Mansion realm, equal in strength to Amaha, and had no reason to show deference to the Great Boon Bronze Color Temple. Yet from the sound of it, he seemed to have been summoned there. Li Ziming remarked, "The Great Boon Bronze Color Temple is quite imperious." Lingdu immediately caught the tone and replied, "The peacock ancestor of the Great Boon Bronze Color Temple had ties with our Dao lineage in the past. The previous master of the temple had also offered guidance to our mountain lord. He feels obliged to honor that relationship with the Peacock clan." Chapter 12:28, Old Tales of the Peacock, II. No wonder. The Peacock Sea was clearly under the 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain's suppression, yet peacocks flew freely across its lands. Li Ziming had wondered why, since relations between the immortals and the Buddhist orders were seldom harmonious. Lingdu continued, "So when the Merciful One fell, it was both proper and expected that our Grand Taoist Master should visit. The temple has 4 Merciful Ones in total. One has fallen, one must report to the Buddhist lands, and another must receive our Grand Taoist Master, leaving only one with free hands. The item I mentioned lies within the Peacock Sea, a legacy left behind by the Tantai ancestors and closely tied to the Peacock clan. It has been known for many years, but we have refrained from acting, fearing the peacocks would claim a share if any commotion arose. our grand Taoist master, bound by personal ties, cannot overtly support us. Thus we have waited till now, the perfect opportunity." Li Ziming had mostly pieced things together during the explanation. He rubbed his teacup for a while, then smiled without giving a reply. He then said, "Since it is a treasure of the Tantai family, what use could you possibly have for me?" Lingdu paused briefly before replying. "First, the formation is difficult to unravel. Second, that merciful one may sense the disturbance. While we retrieve the item below, we would need Zheajing to hold him off for a while." Li Ziming now understood. The Nine Mounds Immortal Mountain clearly wished to avoid a direct conflict with the Great Boon Bronze Color Temple, so they needed someone unconnected to take the blame. The price offered was one of the Purple Mansion realm's spiritual flames hidden within that legacy. Most likely, they intended for Hufu to play the scapegoat before I arrived. They were still discussing it when I appeared. Since I'm from the Wei's Li lineage and they don't wish to offend any Buddhist cultivators, they used the lure of a spiritual flame to push me forward instead. Li Ziming truly could not be certain whether this so-called inheritance had really been left behind by the Tantai ancestors, yet the two of them spoke of it with such familiarity, as if it were their own, that he could not help but waver. Just as he hesitated, Hufu suddenly spoke up. "Zheajing, once that merciful one appears, Senior Lingdu will not be able to handle him. No matter whether you or I step forward, that merciful one will insist on a contest. In the end, our identities will be exposed through combat. Why not stand together? 2 Purple Mansion realm cultivators would be enough to intimidate him into retreating. We wouldn't even have to strike, and this would cut down 90% of the risk of exposure." Hufu carried the weight of the great Ziyuqi temple behind him, and his words held authority. That made the proposal much more palatable. Even if something went wrong, Hufu could bear responsibility. Li Ziming felt somewhat moved and asked deliberately, "Is the Great Boon Bronze Color Temple under the Way of Compassion or the Way of Emptiness?" Hufu replied, "It belongs to the Way of Compassion." Li Ziming breathed a quiet sigh of relief. His granduncle Li Xuanfeng had once slain 18 Buddhist cultivators of the Way of Emptiness along the river, shattering that lineage's great karmic destiny. If this matter had even the slightest connection to the Way of Emptiness, Li Ziming would never have. He touched it. After a moment's thought, he nodded. "It's worth a try." "Good," Lingdu smiled and said, "I must trouble Zheajing to cultivate in the mountains for a while. Once we have everything in order and the time of revelation draws near, we'll invite you over. Afterward, you can meet the grand Taoist master and proceed to the cleansing." In the end, Li Ziming decided to undergo the cleansing to dispel his doubts. The three brewed tea, exchanged nods, and settled the matter. Moongai's Lake. The moon hung full above the lake, its light rippling across the shimmering surface. Streaks of white Dharma light rose from the shore now and then, darting toward the island, first to the central hall, where they lingered briefly, then gliding onward to the rear sanctuary. At the head of the great hall sat a man in black robes, pen in hand. 3 years had passed, yet Li Zhuliuo's features had hardly changed. Only his movements, swift and efficient as he reviewed the reports, showed growth, and the once nervous tension on his face had long since vanished. He soon set down the pen and glanced outside. It was only midnight. Li Zhuliuo's workload had visibly decreased since Li Xuanxuan had announced the 3-year inspection plan. Some of the peak offices that used to report even trivial matters had finally grown some sense. They now included proposed solutions with their petitions. Several sluggish family lineages that had long relied on favors suddenly came to life, busily running about the island each day. The clan officials governing the outskirts became paragons of selflessness and integrity, while the main lineage members who had gone there to vacation abruptly became clever and righteous, exposing a web of corrupt officials in a fit of moral fury. It even resulted in the downfall of a Du family member. How exceedingly diligent they've become. Li Zhuliuo soon realized he hardly needed to exert effort anymore. Even when it came to dealing with a few external families, there were always relatives rushing forth in zealous crusades. Everything seemed to go well, except that the cultivators of Qingdu remained cool toward him. Though still respectful, they showed little warmth. He knew that his handling of the Li Chengpen affair 3 years ago had indeed been lacking. The Qingdu cultivators' authority rested on keeping the main lineage in check, and his obvious partiality had muddled the accounts. Later, when he himself initiated the shadow protection system, it only made it harder for them to like him. But none of that matters anymore. Li Zhuliuo firmly remembered Li Xuanxuan's words, "One should act only according to one's ability." His purpose here was simply to earn goodwill and then step down. With that in mind, he felt far more at ease. After a moment of thought, he noticed a man in plain robes waiting quietly nearby. Li Zhuliuo smiled and said, "Uncle Chengpen, how are matters progressing in the West?" The man before him was none other than Li Chengpen. That blood script incident years ago had nearly forced Li Zhuliuo to imprison the entirety of Qingdu. Later, when the matter was investigated, only Li Hun was officially charged. Even so, Li Zhuliuo could no longer employ Li Chengpen in any sensitive position and instead appointed him as an assistant within the hall. Li Chengpen bowed. All matters are in order. This year's yield from the mines has already been delivered to the family. Li Zhuliuo sighed softly. By his estimation, there were not many days left before the shadow examination. The old master said to let the concealment take effect early and allow them some joy for a while, so that when Jiangqian emerges, he doesn't have to play the villain so blatantly. The current spiritual aura was dwelling heart that charges profundity, which favored fire virtue. Li Jiangqian's seclusion would not last much longer, and thus, this matter could not be delayed. As he pondered, a breeze seemed to sweep through the courtyard, and a figure slowly appeared. The middle-aged man's black robes shimmered like feathers, and a piece of dark jade about 2 feet long hung from his waist. His brows arched slightly, and his eyes held a trace of a smile. Father, Li Zhuliuo snapped to attention, hurried down the steps, and said joyfully, "You've come out of seclusion." Li Chenghuai's cultivation had grown ever more stable over the years. A dense gray radiance flowed faintly through his hair. Though his appearance was plain, the untraceable presence, his concealment-type immortal foundation, made him seem even more unremarkable. He nodded lightly and replied, "The ancestral rites are drawing near, and someone must oversee the family's affairs. I judged that Jiangqian would soon emerge from seclusion, so I came out myself. I took a walk around the island and saw that our household is lively and bustling, with a good atmosphere. You've done well." Li Zhuliuo knew very well W. Hat lay behind that liveliness, and a hint of shame crossed his face as he said softly, "Father, you've misunderstood." Chapter 1229, Great Li Codex, I. Li Chenghuai was momentarily stunned. Li Zhuliuo quickly rose, handed over several memorials from the desk, and explained quietly. As Li Chenghuai read, his brows furrowed, and he raised an eyebrow. "So they've been waiting for me to come out." After finishing the report on the western shore, he received Li Zhuliuo's handling of the matter. After a brief look, he shook his head and said, "Executing them in court wasn't the right move. You lack authority, and you feared damaging family relations." He read through the report about the conferment matter last, paused briefly, and said nothing further. He only sighed softly and replied, "Let's go." Li Zhuliuo felt as though a 500-kilogram burden had been lifted from his shoulders as soon as Li Chenghuai exited seclusion. He removed his black robe, draped it over his arm, and followed quickly. Ahead, Li Chenghuai asked, "Where is the conferment register?" Li Zhuliuo always kept it close to his chest. He handed it to his father, who glanced through it briefly and said, "The 2 lineages are balanced enough. Not bad, though there are a few too many names. Still, since the old elder sent Jiangqian, a few extra won't matter." Li Zhuliuo did not mention Li Xuanxuan's intentions, yet Li Chenghuai already understood when he calculated the timing. As he walked forward, Li Chenghuai suddenly asked, "There were originally 3 chosen candidates in the ancestral records for Brother Chenghui's inheritance. How are those 3 doing now?" Li Zhuliuo had been following the matter and immediately replied, "The one with the closest bloodline and most fitting age is Zhao Dui. He's been diligently cultivating in the island these days. He's quite proactive in both training and tending the spirit fields. The older one, Li Zhaoda, is also of close blood. He's quick and decisive in his work and is currently serving in Jade Court, but he has a poor temper. Last year he got drunk and beat a family member. Someone even reported him to Qingdu." He paused slightly before continuing. "There's another, of more distant lineage, named Li Zhaoxun. The late elder had him temporarily stay in the manor. It seems he gave up early on any hope for the position and instead used this period to focus on cultivation." Li Chenghuai pondered for a moment and shook his head, a difficult choice. Though Li Zhaodui behaved well, his display of weeping during the funeral had been unpleasant. Zhaoda's violent temper made one hesitant, while Li Zhaoxun, whether out of respect for Li Chenghui's bloodline or something else, had already withdrawn himself. Even if Li Chenghuai wanted to help him, it would be difficult. After much thought, the 2 stopped in the corridor, and he asked, "What of their cultivation levels?" Li Zhuliuo bowed. "Zhaoda has already entered the qi cultivation realm. He's a well-known brother in the family with slightly higher recognition. The other 2 are still at the embryonic breathing realm. Both Zhaodui and Zhaoxun are of similar age and cultivation level." Though Li Zhuliuo did not state it outright, his meaning was clear. Even though both received equal treatment from the island, the resources Zhaodui inherited from his father's lineage far exceeded what the weaker Zhaoxun could access, proving that his innate ability was inferior. Li Chenghuai understood at once, took a step forward and nodded. "I understand. Do not voice any opinion on this matter. The Dao lineage has already been assigned. Who among them will achieve the foundation establishment realm is yet to be seen. Moreover, the Dharma artifacts are still kept within the family. I'll find a chance to meet Zhaoxun myself. Don't favor anyone, nor show approval toward any side. If not for what Li Xuanxuan had told him earlier, Li Zhuliuo might have been confused by his father's words. Now, however, he understood perfectly and replied, I already understand, father. I haven't met any of them privately in all these years. Good, Li Chenghuai acknowledged with a smile and said, it's rare to have you tempered by 3 years of experience. You've matured quite a bit. Li Zhuliuo could only give an embarrassed smile and answered, I now understand the gravity of things. If not for the old elder's guidance, the lake our family maintained for 6 generations would have been ruined by me within just a few years. The middle-aged man before him shook his head and replied, the good governance of our ancestors for 100 years is only enough for their descendants to rule mediocrity for 1 generation. A single generation of mediocrity cannot withstand 3 years of tyranny by the next. He was still instructing his eldest son when an apricot-yellow glow suddenly rose into the sky, drifting gently toward the he. Thence, midway up, it fell back down and transformed into clusters of apricot-colored radiant fire that swept across the lake. The radiant fire varied in size, glimmering elegantly in the air like countless floating river lanterns. The night had not yet fully faded, and the pale dawn light reflected the fiery glow across the lake's surface, drawing nearby cultivators to ride the wind and gather in curiosity. Buzz! In the distance, the formation over Mount Qingdu flared to life. Colors shot up toward the heavens as the morning mist formation activated, sweeping across the sky and dispersing all the nearby radiant fire. Li Zhuliuo's eyes lit up. At the same time, Li Chenghuai swiftly soared into the air, circling once before spotting a crimson-robed man riding upon flames. His robe hung loosely around a pure white undershirt, and strands of his black hair burned faintly with apricot-yellow fire. The man was tall and lean, with long black brows and golden eyes. His arms were folded across his chest, a sword hung at his waist, and he casually rested a small round hammer against his shoulder. Seeing Li Chenghuai approach, the young man smiled with youthful vigor and greeted him. Greetings, great uncle, congratulations. Li Zhongqian clasped his hands in salute, and Li Chenghuai returned the gesture with a smile. As others began to arrive, Li Zhongqian lifted his head slightly and asked first, how is Qiyuan? Li Zhuliuo had just caught up and replied with a smile. Qiyuan went into seclusion earlier this year, saying she needed to adjust her breath and perfect her cultivation before choosing a day to break through to the foundation establishment realm. Good. Though Li Zhongqian's position was not high in his generation, his status was special. Once he formed his immortal foundation, his authority would undergo a marked transformation. He saluted everyone and then spoke again. Has there been any news from my father or the Taoist master? Li Chenghuai shook his head as he led him down to the island. Li Zhongqian stood waiting when they reached the courtyard. After everyone had taken their seats, he glanced around and noticed that one person was missing, Li Zhuming. Li Zhongqian waited patiently. After the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, a young man in red robes hurried in from outside the hall. Li Zhuming dared not meet Li Xuanxuan's gaze and timidly took a seat on the side. The old man's eyes were sharp. Though the youth's clothes were neat, his boots were mismatched and his hair ornaments plain. It was obvious he had gone out that morning dressed in bright colors to ride a horse, most likely to flirt with some girl by the lakeshore. Li Zhongqian then clasped his hands in salute and said, Honored elders, this junior has successfully cultivated the immortal foundation from the Great Li Codex. The radiant fire remains ever by my side. When stirred, it can dispel golden astral chi, consume horn wood, burn metal, and boil the seas. When still, it can calm flames, draw in Li light, and not even startle a bird in flight. He had spoken only these few words when the others around him began to offer their congratulations. Li Zhongqian acknowledged their praise with a nod. Li Xuanxuan watched quietly before clearing his throat and saying, That will do for now, everyone. You may go. The elder waved his hand to dismiss the others. He then drew Li Zhongqian inside, closed both doors, and asked, Well, you've cultivated our family's 6th grade technique. No one in our family has ever succeeded in mastering it. There must be something remarkable about it. Chapter 12:30 Great Li Codex II. Li Zhongqian helped him to a seat, offered him tea, and said softly, Old elder, I have fully mastered the Great Li Codex. This immortal foundation is primarily art-based. It can store Li light, command fire with great speed, and connect with the heaven's foremost manifestation. It can also dispel evil spirits. Its inherent wonder lies in its compatibility with medicinal wood. When refined, it yields substances that extend life, heal wounds, and strengthen vitality. Oh. Li Xuanxuan's eyes brightened and he asked, Medicinal compatibility, do you mean like alchemical pills? Li Jiangqian shook his head. He extended his hand and pressed his thumb against the middle joint of two joined fingers. A bright apricot-yellow flame bloomed with a soft pop. This flame differed from the lively, radiant fire that was usually seen. It was also unlike the 5 varieties surging within the Yang Radiant Red Sparrow banner. Instead, it remained perfectly still at his fingertip, unwavering and steady. He smiled. The extraordinary quality you mentioned, old elder, is likely this very flame. The fire of my immortal foundation is called apricot radiance. Ordinary flames fear earth, but this one resists most forms of it. The inheritance text describes it in great detail, and only 2 earths man. Ifist earth and returning earth can restrain it. Unfortunately, when placed within a furnace, it burns too fiercely to refine pills. My Kihai now glows entirely apricot yellow. Even should I one day attain the purple mansion realm, I would remain estranged from pill refinement. As for the medicines it produces, most can only be taken by myself. Perhaps creatures of the phoenix or Luan lineages might tolerate them as well. Li Xuanxuan nodded to show his understanding and sighed. As expected of a 6th-grade radiant fire technique, it embodies nearly every advantage that radiant fire could possess, and even manages to squeeze in a miraculous healing property. Li Jiangqian quickly waved his hand and replied, there are still limits between Dao lineages. Concealment, pill refinement, and healing others are Dao lineages I cannot touch. Though my fire control is swift, the Li light burns too fiercely, making escape arts hard to cultivate. It's all a matter of gaining one aspect while losing another. It is never complete. The elder nodded repeatedly, his expression full of emotion. He exhaled a long breath and said, now that you've come out of seclusion, I'll have to trouble you with family affairs once more. The elder took a small wooden box from beside the desk, opened it with one hand, and revealed a thick stack of meticulously written silk scrolls. Li Jiangqian, not knowing what it was about, accepted it and began to read. The young man skimmed through a few pages, flipped all the way to the bottom, then turned back to the beginning. After carefully reading the section on the western shore, he smiled and said, they must have eaten leopard gall to be this bold. Li Xuanxuan's heart tightened at those words. People like Li Zixuan were mortals. None of them could withstand Jiangqian's kind of handling. The elder quickly pulled him back and said, in the end, these people are still elders. Many of them are respected and have children who have sacrificed for the family. The island's problems must be solved, yes, but we can't chill too many hearts in the process. I understand. Li Jiangqian held the scroll in one hand. The long strip of white silk unfurled to the ground, fluttering softly in the breeze. He looked down at it and smiled as he said, leave this matter to me. Uncle Julio should continue managing the household for a few more months, so the people below won't have too much to say. Outside the hall, Li Julio exited the main hall, leaving it to the 2 within, and descended alongside Li Chenghui. Only then did he remember the letter from Li Zizhai and brought it up. Li Julio spoke with pride, his tone slightly excited. Li Chenghui, however, showed little visible reaction. He waited until his son finished speaking, then after a long silence finally said, he has always been exceptional. Li Chenghui's relationship with Li Zizhai had never been particularly close. After a brief hesitation, Li Julio continued, grandfather wishes for me to visit the Southern Sea before I reach the Foundation establishment realm. He plans to help me choose a suitable Dao companion and have me complete my breakthrough there. Li Chenghui nodded in response and said, that would indeed be best. Marriage is no small matter. It's much better to have him look out for you in that regard. Li Julio observed his father's expression and said softly, grandfather also sent his disciple Quan Yuduan to deliver a letter, but you were still in seclusion at that time, and he insisted on handing it to you personally. He returned a year ago and has been cultivating in the wilderness region. I've already sent someone to fetch him. Wang Quan and the others had gone north together. Letters had quickly come back saying they'd entered the underground palace and encountered several families' direct descendants. But over half a year had passed since, and communication had been severed. Even Quan Yuduan could no longer reach anyone inside. By now, the Dao lineage of Mount Zioshi in the north had been silent for 3 full years. It was suspected that a hidden grotto heaven existed beneath it. Unable to remain idle, Quan Yuduan, who had been assigned as an escort, had left to wander across Jiangbei. It was uncertain whether he had ever completed his sect's mission. However, he had recently returned again to the wilderness. When he heard Li Julio mention that Li Zizhai had left a letter, Li Chenghui finally appeared uneasy and paced around the courtyard twice. Just as dawn broke, a man in a bright red robe, Quan Yuduan, arrived swiftly with an escort. The youthful man wore a jade coronet on his head. He recognized Li Chenghui immediately from his dharma robe and the black jade pendant at his waist. His eyes lit up with emotion as he bowed deeply and said respectfully, greetings, young master. My master and mistress have missed you dearly all these years, they oft. And speak of you, but with such distance between you, meeting again has not been possible. Li Chenghui awkwardly helped him up. After speaking, Quan Yuduan indeed drew a letter from his sleeve and said softly, "This letter was written personally by my master. He instructed me to deliver it into your hands only, have everyone else withdraw, and open it yourself." Li Chenghui felt the letter. It was not thick, even rather thin. The outside was wrapped in spirit cloth, plain and unadorned, and was clearly handwritten. He glanced around, and Li Zhuliuo quickly ordered the attendants to close the hall doors and withdraw. Only then did he remove the outer seal and take out the pure white letter. The flowing handwriting of Li Zijai immediately came into view, written on the 20th night of the spring moon. "I, your father, am temporarily stationed in the southern sea. All matters have been settled, and I am presently selecting a wife for your son. If you possess the aspiration to cultivate the Tao and seek a divine ability, follow Yuduan south across the sea. Profound pills, mystical medicine, Dharma artifacts, spirit treasures, sacred lands, and immortal mountains. Whatever you require, I will spare no effort to provide. If your heart lies instead with protecting the family and living out your years in peace, I have sent Yuduan with a Tao collection, fine silks and satin, and splendid garments and delicacies. It will be enough to shelter your descendants and sustain their honor for 3 generations. Written by your father's own hand." Li Chenghui read each word clearly, then flipped the letter over, though he knew nothing more was written. Still, he scanned the back from top to bottom and turned it over repeatedly in his hands. Quan Yuduan, hearing no response for a long while, waited quietly before asking quietly, "My lord, the master instructed me to deliver the Tao collection, sealed in a purple mansion realm talisman. It includes all necessities for the Foundation establishment realm, Dharma artifacts, spirit items, talismans, and treasured panaceas alike." He continued listing the items one by one, but Li Chenghui seemed not to hear them at all. As if waking from a dream, he rasped, "Did he leave any other instructions?" An uneasy Quan Yuduan bowed again and replied respectfully, "The master, in his earlier years, could scarcely care for himself, let alone look after you. He now wishes to make amends." Chapter 12:31, Register I. Li Chenghui listened and put the letter away into his sleeve before replying, "I understand. When will you return with a reply, Taoist friend Quan Yuduan?" Quan Yuduan hesitated and said, "My junior brother is still in the north and should take a little while longer. I will be cultivating by the shore in the meantime. Young master may take his time to consider. Once there is news, just summon me to the wilderness." Li Chenghui gave a slight nod and Quan Yuduan withdrew down the hall. As the doors of the hall opened, the cheerful voice of his eldest son, Li Zhuliuo, greeting Quan Yuduan, floated in. Then the doors shut again with a creak, sealing off all noise from outside. Li Chenghui remained in place, his sleeve hiding the letter. He did not move, his gaze fixed and motionless, until the shifting of light and shadow marked the passage of time. Outside, Li Zhuliuo, having waited for a long time, finally knocked and entered. Li Zhuliuo called softly, "Father." Li Chenghui still held the letter within his sleeve. His lips moved slightly, but he made no mention of it and instead asked, "You intend to go to the southern sea together with Quan Yuduan?" Li Zhuliuo wished time could hurry by. The past 3 to 5 years had been unbearably tedious and filled with endless busyness. He was long weary of it. At the mention of this matter, joy filled his face as he nodded and said, "Yes, just waiting for their return." Li Chenghui could tell from his tone that his son was eager to follow Quan Yuduan to the southern sea. He was already dreaming of leisure and meeting the fairies of the various sects. His heart was brimming with expectation. It was only human nature. If such good fortune had fallen upon Li Chenghui himself in his youth, he too would have been restless and impatient. Pouring a cup of tea, he replied, "Good, you must prepare well and not waste this opportunity." Li Zhuliuo sensed his father's unease and wanted to ask about the letter, but Li Chenghui waved him away before he could. The eldest son could only leave reluctantly. When the hall was empty again, Li Chenghui finally took out the letter, its back facing upward, and gently placed it on the table. He knew full well the weight of that letter. Frankly speaking, either choice within would make the cultivators of Jiangnan weep with joy. It should have been a matter for celebration, yet not a trace of a smile could reach his face. He stood alone in the hall most of the night before hearing movement outside. An old man in blue-gray robes pushed open the door. Li Chenghui bowed low and said softly, "Greetings, old elder." He then handed over the letter. Li Xuanxuan sat down, poured tea, and began reading it carefully. Li Chenghui shook his head slightly and said, "What does he owe me? What is there to owe? Those days of humiliation, of living under another's roof, orphaned and helpless, are such things to be compensated with this?" Li Xuanxuan kept his eyes on the letter, his gaze deep and unreadable. Li Chenghui, his expression calm, spoke softly. To tell you the truth, had this letter come 20 years earlier, I would have thrown it straight back into Quan Yuduan's hands and told him plainly that I want neither choice. He let out a brief laugh and sighed, but it came too late. I am already a father and already an elder of the family. There is too much to consider, so how could I simply discard it? The youthful days of sharp teeth and hot blood are gone. To put it bluntly, what once felt like righteous resentment now seems petty. That is why I accepted the letter. Li Xuanxuan nodded gravely. I understand. The elder refilled the teacups and shook his head. In our family, the four Zais each had their duties. Not just you, Ziming and Chengzhai were the same. Chengzhai was always respectful, yet I knew in his heart he could never truly be close to Ziming. Such matters are difficult. Don't say your father never understood you. In truth, you never understood him either. There was far too much swallowing of pride and forced compromise in those days. The elder raised a hand to his cheek, feeling along his skin until he found a small bump. He pointed it out to Li Chenghui and said with a wry smile, "Look here, when my inner demons flared, I went all the way to Hangzhou Dao Gate for help. They implanted 5 golden light pills beneath my skin. The wounds healed, but my face has never looked the same since. Your situation is much the same. Back then, the family endured its grievances in silence, bending and compromising until we ended up like this. Now that you've reached rough ground and your heart feels unbalanced, it's only natural you want to speak and question. Your father is a reasonable man. Write him back. Say what must be said. There's no need to pretend not to feel it." Li Chenghui fell silent for a while. Then Li Xuanxuan took his arm and led him to the main seat, placed a brush in his hand, and started to grind the ink. "Go on, write." When Li Zhuluo left the hall, Quan Yuduan, robed in crimson, was still admiring the view on the island. Though Li Zhuluo was curious about his grandfather's letter, he did not ask. After exchanging a few polite words with Quan Yuduan, he returned to the main hall. Once seated at the main seat, Dili Guang came forward to light the lamps. Li Zhuluo smiled and asked, "How shall things be arranged from here on?" Li Zhuluo said no more, but Dili Guang was sharp. People like him had a natural sense for such things, and he could tell that Li Zhuluo's time in authority was coming to an end. He understood what Li Zhuluo was really asking and replied respectfully, "I will follow however the family head arranges things. To remain in your service is a blessing I've earned through past lives." Only a few direct descendants knew that Li Zhuluo was leaving for the Southern Sea, but Dili Guang had likely guessed that following him would bring great benefit. His sincerity made Li Zhuluo nod again and again. While he was reading through the scrolls in the hall, a messenger arrived, announcing that Qi Juyan had come to make a report. Having managed the household for years, Li Zhuluo knew that Qi Juyan had always handled the affairs of the Purple Stable Valleys, penetrating mountain-profound Pin with precision, submitting reports every 3 months without fail. His sudden appearance could only mean something had happened with the Purple Mansion realm formation. Li Zhuluo immediately rose and said, "Hurry, invite Dharma Protector Qi in at once." Dili Guang hurried down personally to invite him in. Once Qi Juyan entered the main hall, he dismissed the attendants, shut the doors himself, and stood guard outside. Qi Juyan looked much the same as he had 3 years ago. The direct descendant of the Qi family remained as courteous as ever, bowing respectfully as he reported, "Family head of the 32 profound pins, the main bodies of the first 12 have been more than half completed. However, Purple Smoke Gate has already begun packing up. The cultivators stationed on the island are about to return to their gate, with another group soon to replace them. According to what I heard, it is to prevent the formation patterns from being exposed for too long." When Wu was known for his glib tongue and could turn the dead into the living with words, so it was hard to tell either they truly feared exposure or if it was merely time for rotation. Li Zhuluo listened silently as Qi Juyan continued. "He departed overnight and did not have time to pay respects to you, family head, but asked me to convey his apologies. He also sent a message. Li Quexi is ready to break through the Qi cultivation realm. Purple Smoke Gate has prepared all the necessary pills." It was not surprising that Li Quexi would reach the Qi cultivation realm early. If anything, Li Zhuluo thought it somewhat late. Still, regardless of whether she needed it, the family ought to send their support. He nodded and said, "I'll send someone to the Purple Smoke Gate at once to deliver a portion of resources for her breakthrough." Qi Juyan bowed and replied respectfully, "Besides that, there is another important matter. A cultivator from the Purple Smoke Gate has been traveling nearby. He said he once gave guidance to a child from a small household by the lake, initially out of fondness for the child. But after 3 to 5 years, he developed affection and now wishes to bring the child back to the sect as a disciple. He asked me to consult you first, family head." Chapter 1232, Register II. This was no trivial matter. Li Zhuluo's expression changed sharply as he asked, "Which family, what surname?" Qi Juyan smiled bitterly as he answered, "The Ding family. a small branch living by the lakeside, a widow and her orphaned child. The mother has a little cultivation, but from what I've seen, the matter isn't exactly honorable. The Ding family. Li Zhuliuo's suspicions flared as he asked, "This matter may be somewhat abrupt, but how is it dishonorable?" Hui Juyan let out a quiet sigh. The man of the Ding family was killed by someone from Floating Cloud Cave. Wei Zheng himself knows the name. Because of that, the widow and her child have not lived poorly. But from what I can tell, that cultivator of the Purple Smoke Gate seems to harbor certain feelings for the widow. He once lodged there, and it's said that their voices carried to the neighbors on a windy night. Fortunately, no one recognized him, and the child seemed not to resist. He's a proper foundation establishment cultivator, yet didn't even set up a formation. Such audacity in his indulgence. Li Zhuliuo's expression turned a bit strange. A dignified cultivator of the Purple Smoke Gate could easily have kept such noise hidden. He could only sigh at the man's peculiar tastes. Now understanding the situation, he hesitated for a while before saying awkwardly, "We should still inform Ding Weizeng. In any case, it could be considered a fortunate turn. But what sort of man is that Purple Smoke Gate cultivator? Is he fickle or lustful? I only worry that he might abandon her after a few years, then it would reflect poorly on us." Hui Juyan replied, "The child is named Ding Mu. The cultivator from the Purple Smoke Gate is the master of Tether Bell Peak, called Cao Chu, Dao titled Huxizi. He has no reputation for being unfaithful, but he already has one wife and 2 concubines within his peak. If he brings her back, she will become another concubine." Li Zhuliuo had no solution to that and replied with some embarrassment, "If both sides are willing, we should still wait for the Purple Smoke Gate steward to come and discuss it. From what I see, our side is at a disadvantage. This matter must be handled properly." Indeed. Ding Mu was not a direct descendant of the Li family, nor of any prominent lineage. His relation to Ding Weizeng was distant at best, making the issue less sensitive. Still, since he was under the Li family, such matters required communication between the 2 Purple Mansion realm factions. Hui Juyan said, "Taoist Cao Chu has already reported this to his gate. Someone should be sent over soon to discuss the arrangements." Good. Li Zhuliuo let out a small breath of relief, watched Hui Juyan depart, and began to think that boy Ding Mu will surely be weak and alone in the gate. This is the perfect chance to offer help in his time of need. If handled well, he could grow within the Purple Smoke Gate and one day become a solid connection. He could be an entirely beneficial prospect. Since Li Jiangqian had emerged from seclusion, Li Zhuliuo could finally relax. Only 2 matters remained: announcing the list and conducting the ancestral rites. "Go invite Jiangqian." A short while later, Li Jiangqian entered the hall. Li Zhuliuo greeted him with a smile and said, "The day of the family's ancestral rite is drawing near. The usual traditions remain, but the demonic creature must still be captured. Are we using a Foundation Establishment realm demonic beast this year? Such creatures are hard to find now." The sacrificial demonic creature for the Li family ceremony was usually decided by its Foundation Establishment realm members. Since Li Minggong was still in seclusion, the decision would fall to I Chenghui and Li Jiangqian. Testing the waters, Li Zhuliuo said gently, "The family's finances are rather strained, and you've only just reached the Foundation Establishment realm. I think it would be best to keep things simple this year." After all, with Li Minggong in seclusion, it was unlikely that both Foundation Establishment realm cultivators would go out together to hunt a demonic creature. The task would likely fall to Li Chenghui, whose cultivation was higher. Whether through combat or pursuit, it was a dangerous undertaking in uncertain times. To Li Zhuliuo, the ceremony was merely a formality. Given the circumstances, there was no need for such extravagance. Li Jiangqian understood his concerns. Inwardly, he was still contemplating how to obtain talisman qi and thought to himself, "If I head to the Eastern Sea or Helen, I wonder if I can make it in time." It was not that he feared failing to catch one. Whether or not Li Chenghui helped, Li Jiangqian himself could subdue those rogue beasts with ease. But the family was no longer what it once was. Once a humble Foundation Establishment realm household ignored by all, now it stood as a Purple Mansion realm family. With their Taoist master away from the lake and many eyes watching, any large commotion could draw suspicion. If Li Ziming were here, he could have simply reached into the great void, captured one, and placed it upon the mountain for the ritual with no one knowing. Even if someone did notice, they would simply think it was for alchemy. But with him absent, hauling a massive demonic creature home themselves would certainly appear improper. Frowning slightly, Li Jiangqian replied, "What you say is reasonable, family head. This matter should be discussed further. I will consult the old elder before making a decision." Li Zhuliuo nodded and handed over the register, a golden-edged scroll listing the names, from the table. He said softly, "This is the list for the conferments. Take a look, Jiangqian." Li Jianqian smiled instead of taking the scroll, bowed, and replied, "There's no need. The family head may proceed with the arrangements. I'll take a walk around the island to have a look." On the island. As dawn broke over the lake, the residents bustled with excitement. Two majestic stone tigers before the mansion were draped in red silk, while the servants on both sides wore red robes, laughing and calling out, "Congratulations, congratulations." The plaque above the main gate gleamed, and the gilded words Eastern Dawn glowed in the morning light. A plump and fair Li Zixuan stood before the mansion dressed in festive red robes, with attendants on both sides addressing him respectfully as master. Eastern Dawn residence was the ancestral home of the Yuanwen lineage. Once spacious, it had since been divided into quarters for the many descendants. Each courtyard had been split into 4 houses and each house into 4 rooms. Though grand outside, it was now cramped within. Every time Li Zixuan stood at the gate, he would sigh. But today he sighed no more. His face was radiant with joy. Inside waited Li Minggong's younger brother, face glowing and wearing a colorful headscarf. The guests treated him with marked respect. As a group of visitors entered, a man in short robes came forward, grinning as he said, "Brother, with your sons and nephews all receiving conferment, would you like a finer residence? I know of a few excellent spots." The middle-aged man with the floral scarf was in high spirits and treated the real estate brokers who approached him with unusual courtesy, smiling as he said, "Give it a few days, and there'll be plenty for you to earn." He laughed heartily as he led the broker inside. The courtyard, though narrow, was packed with well-wishers. He walked proudly with his head high and chest out, in striking contrast to his now wary-eyed father, Li Zixuan. Li Chengzai declared in a loud, confident voice, "In this round of family conferments, our Yuanwen East residence has 5 who received honors, spanning 4 family lineages, everyone." He raised his cup with a smile. "The main seat cherishes his kin and the families thrive in harmony. Let us toast for the lake, for the island, and for the clan." Chapter 12:33 Eastern Residence I. The crowd raised their cups in celebration. Li Chengzai, wearing a colorful scarf, was brimming with confidence, while Li Zixuan kept scanning the crowd, counting the number of guests. Any sense of ease he once had outside the courtyard had long been thrown to the clouds. The Chanan families didn't send anyone. That's still understandable. But the families of Li Chengdan and Li Chengpen didn't even send greetings. There are barely any prominent guests from the main lineage. Li Zixuan watched quietly, not particularly surprised, as he felt the last trace of false hope vanish. He moved from the bright, lively outer courtyard to the dark, unlit hall inside and saw a few children squatting in the corner. Raising his pale, plump hand, he said softly, "Bring the third one back to me." Before long, Li Chengzai, still wearing his colorful scarf, walked into the courtyard looking displeased. When he saw his father's grim expression, he tried to reason with him. "I've already asked around. Chengdan was sent into Milan by the old elder, and Chengpen is near Zhuluo. It's reasonable that they couldn't come. Why the long face, father? You'll make everyone uncomfortable." Li Zixuan shot him a glare and scolded, "You know nothing. I may not be a cultivator and couldn't tell what kind of fire that was in the sky that day, but several cultivators said the eldest young master, Li Jianqian, broke through and came out of seclusion. Li Zhuluo may seem amiable, but Li Jianqian certainly isn't." Li Chengzai frowned as his father continued, "Our eastern residence is the poorest of them all. We had no choice but to take the lead. We were the first to step forward, and once those above withdrew, everyone else divided the spoils neatly and scattered like the wind, leaving us who stuck our necks out to be cut down. Now no one dares to show up." Having grown up in the residence and having always relied on his father, Li Chengzai panicked. "What? How can that be? We went to Qingdu together, we all received the conferment, and now they just abandon us. Who will ever dare take the lead again?" Li Zixuan replied, "You speak easily. When those above decide to suppress you, they'll always find countless excuses and reasons that please both sides. And when punishment comes, it's always the leaders who get beaten. If we don't make some preparations, we'll suffer for sure." Li Chengzai nodded repeatedly, but Li Zixuan's brows remained furrowed as he continued. "Back then, people favored us because everyone had their eyes on the conferment. But now that it's over, we're like a phoenix plucked bare. Fortunately, we made some plans earlier. The children's achievements and merits are real, with little embellishment. You don't need to act rashly on this matter. Just behave honestly and keep your heads down. None of you can win against them. We can only rely on Minggong's reputation and stay humble. I'll go to the hall later to plead guilty myself. Let everything come at me. At worst, I'll suffer some hardship, but there will be no danger to my life." Li Chengzai hesitated and said, "Every household is celebrating right now. Father, if you go up the mountain, wouldn't it seem ill-timed? We'll all lose face, and why make it look as if we've done something wrong? This little bit of conferment we received is already far less than what others got." Li Zixuan's face hardened. "How is it ill-timed? Right now, Li Zhuliuo is still in power, and Li Jianqian has just come out of seclusion. If we don't go now, when will we? Should we wait until Li Jianqian's blade is already at our throats? Once he loosens his stance now, he'll have to restrain himself later when dealing with us. Oh, Li Cheng's, I spoke with some doubt. The eldest young master is returning to the island. Li Zixuan let out a bitter laugh. He said nothing more, shook his head, flung his sleeves, and walked out. The front courtyard was crowded with guests, so he had no choice but to leave through the rear gate. The morning mist was still cold, and Li Zixuan pulled his sleeves tight around himself. His round, pale face looked blank. After fighting for this and that, not a single person feels grateful. All this talk about conferments, but how many have truly made something of themselves? Only Minggong in the eastern residence is a cultivator. I'm just counting the days now. This is as far as I can help them. Li Zixuan was the most anxious among all the family elders, for there were simply too few cultivators in Yuanwen's lineage. After Li Xuanxuan, the other lineage under Li Chengden's Yuandu western residence had Li Zhufeng and Li Zhaoyang before, Li Xinghan and Li Xingxai after, and even Li Kuai of the Purple Smoke Gate. As long as there were cultivators, they could split their estates peacefully and never fall to the outer fringes of the island. Western residents had several lineages, and the leading brothers, Li Zhufeng and the rest, were all cultivators. Whether striving for conferment or seeking outside posts, things were far easier for them. Every family member they placed outside became another path for the future. The more they arranged, the easier it became. Unlike him, Li Zixuan, who had to struggle alone to find a way out for his descendants. If his children and grandchildren couldn't cultivate, so be it, but even their hearts lacked will and ambition. How could Li Zixuan not feel dejected? He hunched within his robes against the morning chill, his whole body cold and unsteady on his feet, though music echoed through the streets, sorrow-filled. His heart. The road from the eastern residence to the main hall wasn't far, but the hall sat high on the hill, and it was enough to leave any mortal drenched in sweat. Li Zixuan usually traveled by sedan chair, but since he had slipped out in secret, he could only wait by the roadside and flag down a carriage. There were plenty of carriage drivers and messengers in the island, but such work was undignified. Direct descendants rarely took those jobs unless they were desperate. Most drivers were family members or servants of cultivators who had been elevated into the main lineage, working to support their households. He climbed into the small carriage, finally feeling a bit of warmth. Dozing on and off as it rocked along, he lost track of time until the air grew warm. Then he heard a shout from outside, "Master, we've arrived." When he lifted the curtain, Li Zixuan saw a vast cluster of towering palaces. He began to step out, but age had stiffened his back and legs, so he struggled to dismount. Just then, a cool sensation brushed his waist. A pair of fair hands had caught him by the back and gently helped him down. He steadied himself on the ground, exhaled deeply, and looked up. His eyes traveled up a pair of plain black boots, unadorned and smooth, to a crimson robe trimmed with gold, fluttering lightly in the wind. Raising his gaze a little higher, he saw a pale face with long brows. Beneath those dark brows were golden eyes, gazing at him with a faint smile. Li Zixuan's breath caught, his heart tightening in an instant. Eldest young master. The lean Li Jianqian towered over the elder. Golden yellow flames burned faintly upon his black hair, giving off a soft glow. Supporting Li Zixuan firmly, he clasped the old man's plump hand warmly and said with a smile, "What a coincidence, meeting you here of all places. May I ask what brings you here?" Li Zixuan felt his heart go cold under that gaze. How could he say that he had deliberately left without his sedan chair, sneaking out through the side gate to catch the hall unprepared? Forcing a calm smile, he replied, "The conferment matter was just announced. I came to pay my respects to the family head and express my gratitude for his grace." Oh, Li Jianqian shook his head and laughed as they walked toward the main hall. "You are far too humble, elder. Though I've cultivated for a few years, I still have much to learn from you. I had thought that once our family members gained their conferments, they would grow proud and indulge themselves. But seeing you today, so consistent in word and deed, how fortunate the Eastern residents is to have an elder like you teaching them, don't you agree?" Chapter 12:34 Eastern Residents, II. Li Jianqian had always been smooth with words, so Li Zixuan could not tell what he was really thinking. His scalp tingled, and he only wished to reach the hall quickly. Quickening his pace as he saw the doors before him, he replied, "Yes." Li Jianqian smiled and nodded. "I was thinking the same thing, so I discussed it with the family head early this morning. The family members who have received conferments must be carefully supervised. If anyone from their bloodline, young or old, commits a mistake, their conferment will first be suspended, pending review and reconsideration. This will prevent anyone from slipping through by mixing the clear with the murky." Li Zixuan stood as if struck by lightning, frozen for a moment and nearly stopping in his tracks. What had Li Zixuan come here to do? To plead guilty? Yet with one sentence, Li Jianqian had made it so that if he did, his entire family's conferment would be stripped away. He stood there dazed for a long breath, hastily gathering his thoughts before speaking. This seems rather harsh. After all, every household has its young and old. Surely you don't mean. Li Jianqian sighed, shook his head, and interrupted. Elder, your heart is too soft. How could this be called harsh? The eastern residents will surely never make a mistake. You need not worry about the other lineages. Oh, Dilly Guang is here. Please, Elder, after you. Li Jianqian timed it perfectly, cutting him off right as they reached the hall doors. Before Li Zixuan could respond, Jianqian bowed lightly, transformed into a streak of golden yellow light, and soared into the air. Dilly Guang stepped forward respectfully. My lord, the family head is currently receiving the cultivators from the Purple Smoke Gate. Do you have urgent business? Li Zixuan exhaled twice, bowed slightly, and withdrew without a word. As he descended the steps, he sensed something was wrong and began to think. Such a major decision settled just like that. Not a single whisper across the island. I let that boy frighten me. He was about to turn back, but then fear struck him again. No, I can't. After what he just said, how could I still go up there to plead guilty? He's adept at twisting black into white and white into black. He'd turn it into me willingly offering to give up my family's conferment to uphold family discipline. They'd all hate me to death. Li Zixuan's limbs went cold. He trembled for a while and thought, there's no way out. Unless Minggong comes out of seclusion, I'll be tormented to death by that boy. I must go and beg the old elder. Noise filled the courtyard, but it was quiet inside Li Zhuluo's inner hall. Qi Juyan stood at the center of the grand hall, slightly turned to the side, hands clasped together as he reported upward. Family head, this is Fairy Wei in Taoist Cow. Greetings, family head. The two bowed slightly, and Li Zhuluo promptly replied, greetings to both esteemed immortals. The Purple Smoke Gate had sent Wei Danying, Tinglin's trusted aide, dressed in a yellow feathered robe and looking rather uneasy. Taoist Cow, on the other hand, was tall and broad-shouldered, with a full black beard. He held a small, thin child of about 8 or 9 by the hand. It was clear they had come to resolve Taoist Cow's romantic entanglement. Cao Chu himself seemed perfectly at ease, his face bold and hearty. His fists were as large as vinegar bowls, his robe shimmering faintly with heavenly light. The thin-handed child, Dingmu, could barely hold one of his fingers. In a deep voice, Cao Chu said, I've grown quite fond of this child, so I must trouble the lake to part with him. Everyone knew in their hearts who it was that he was so fond of. Wei Danying hesitated before saying, Family head, I believe you're already aware of Taoist Cow's situation. Since he has the intention to take a disciple, according to the Purple Smoke Gate's rules, I've come to ask your approval in person. When the time comes, we'll bring the child's family along as well. It was clear Wei Danying wasn't close with Cao Chu, and since she also knew the matter was somewhat indecent, her words were deliberately vague. Li Zhuluo couldn't embarrass her, so he nodded and said, to be accepted into the Purple Smoke Gate is this child's blessing. As for his future cultivation resources, the lake will prepare an additional share for him. His family may accompany him as well, please rest assured. Good. Cao Chu appeared quite pleased, bowing with a broad grin. His voice was naturally loud, and his cheerful shout echoed through the hall, making Wei Danying flush with embarrassment. She quickly said, Taoist Cow, you may go down first. Cao Chu didn't argue. He simply clasped his hands, nodded cheerfully, and left. The frail child, Dingmu, followed in silence, led along by his large hand. The child was moving stiffly like a puppet, yet with a faint smile on his face. Li Zhuluo watched the pair leave with a slight frown, while Wei Danying exhaled softly, raising her brows with a faint smile as she said, This must have troubled you, family head. Taoist Cow is a rather unruly man in the sect, and most cultivators avoid his peak altogether. Fortunately, he confines his attention to his wives and concubines, and his conduct is still within bounds. Li Zhuluo had seen the glow of Cao Chu's mana earlier and felt equally embarrassed, so Cao Chu cultivates the bright Yang Dao. Well, that does suit him after all. Both tacitly dropped the subject. Wei Danying's expression dimmed slightly as she said, Changxiao Gate and Hangzhou Dao Gate have been fighting fiercely in the light boat sea these past few years. Changxiao Gate has suffered heavy losses, which could have been to our advantage. Since our Purple Smoke Gate has little influence in the outer sea, it would have been a good opportunity to extend our reach. But something happened in the Eastern Sea, forcing Wenwu to be reassigned. The situation is quite dire. The earth veins beneath our Purple Smoke Gate's sea territory shifted violently. The fire beneath the earth erupted, spewing molten lava. They say the blaze was visible from 500 kilometers away. The dragon kin from beneath the sea have all surfaced. It's said the seabed is now engulfed in baleful fire. Countless creatures, both demon and human, have perished. Purple Smoke Gate's strength overseas had never matched that of Changxiao Gate or Hangzhou Dao Gate, though they had invested much effort in the outer sea over the years. Judging by Wei Danying's expression, this calamity was no minor blow. Since both the earth veins and fire veins were shifting, and underwater at that, the water veins were likely disrupted as well. The combined upheaval would devastate formations and architecture alike. Li Zhuliuo's expression grew grave as he asked softly, "Has the cause been determined?" Wei Danying looked somewhat troubled and replied, "It's either the work of a Purple Mansion realm cultivator highly skilled in the earth virtue, or a genuine upheaval of the earth veins, a calamity beyond anyone's control. In any case, our gates Dao Ist Master has already gone to investigate, and other cultivators are being stationed across the Eastern Sea. With so many of our people being redeployed, our assistance here may be limited. If progress slows on your side, please don't take offense." Li Zhuliuo nodded slowly to show his understanding. It was clear the Purple Smoke Gate had their reasons for bringing this up. His own formation work could wait, so he said quietly, "No matter. It's best that the Purple Smoke Gate tend to its own affairs first." Wei Danying took her leave and departed from the hall. Li Zhuliuo escorted her partway northward, and judging from the route she took, she was most likely headed toward Xuanmiao Temple. Taoist Master Sumian of the Treasure Earth Dao lineage, an earth virtue cultivator well-versed in earth veins. It seems they intend to request his help. Chapter 12:35 Execution. Dawn was just breaking, yet the grand hall remained brightly lit. Li Zhuliuo placed several stacks of bamboo scrolls onto the desk, exhaling in relief. The lamplight cast a pale yellow glow over his face as he turned and said, "These scrolls record the sect's affairs and matters great and small over the past few years. Jiangqian, read through them when you have time." Li Jiangqian, still dressed in his crimson robe, nodded thoughtfully. He picked up the topmost scroll and began reading. Li Zhuliuo shook his head. "I have not managed things well these past few years. If there are any omissions, I must trouble you, Jiangqian, to make up for them." "You're too modest, uncle." Li Jiangqian smiled and shook his head, replying, "You have always been kind-hearted and devoted to the family. There are no omissions at all, only benevolent governance. The policies you suggested were all excellent. I will reflect on them carefully." Li Zhuliuo merely sighed, shaking his head. He removed his black robe, stored it in his storage pouch, and said, "Don't flatter me. I am about to break through the 9th stage of the Qi cultivation realm, so this is a good time for me to go into seclusion." He withdrew politely. Li Jiangqian took his seat at the head of the hall, raised his brows, and looked at Dili Guang beside him. "Are all the young masters on their way?" Dili Guang nodded respectfully and replied, "Family head, young masters Jianglong and Jiangxia entered seclusion 3 months and half a year ago, respectively. Messages have been sent, but they likely won't receive them in time." Li Jiangqian chuckled. "No matter. The two brothers have always managed floating south and eastern shore, and everything there runs smoothly. There's no need for them to come in person. What about Jiangliang and Jiangyan?" Dili Guang quickly replied, "The 4th young master has been by Lord Kui Juyan's side. Since that lord is currently here on the island, he's already waiting in the side hall. The young master Jiangyan has also been cultivating nearby and is ready as well." Li Jiangqian ordered, "Invite them in." He lowered his head to continue reading the scroll in his hand. After just a few breaths, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hall, and a young man entered, sword in his arms and his golden eyes bright as he called out in a clear voice, "Elder brother." This was the 4th brother, Li Jiangliang, now 15 years old. His expression was lively, and he resembled Li Jiangqian greatly, though he appeared more cheerful and gentle. He called out warmly, "Congratulations, elder brother. I went to your residence some days ago to pay my respects, but your whereabouts were uncertain, and I never managed to meet you. My sincerest congratulations." Li Jiangliang was warm and enthusiastic, and naturally, Li Jiangqian did not treat him coldly. He greeted him with an equally bright smile and said, "I was occupied with matters these past days and had little free time. Now that I finally have a moment, I came to invite you myself, 4th brother." After a few pleasantries, Li Jiangqian turned his gaze toward his youngest brother at the back, Li Jiangyan. All 4 of Li Zhaowei's sons were tall and well-built. Even the plainest among them, Li Jianglong, had a physique fit for admiration among ordinary people. Yet the one before him, Li Jiangyan, was short and thin, almost frail. What truly made Li Jiangqian frown, however, was his face. The Li family was known for their good looks, especially the lineage descended from Li Tongya. Li Zijian had once been famed as a handsome man, and Li Qinghang was a beauty without peer. Even Li Zhaowei, the family head for so many years, had won the admiration of many female cultivators over the years. As for Li Jiangliang standing before him, his bearing was elegant and refined. But Li Jiangyan had a sharp chin and monkey-like cheeks, with narrow, swollen eyes. Several warts marred the side of his face, each sprouting coarse hairs. His appearance was not only unsightly, but carried a timid, cowering, so much so that one couldn't help feeling a sense of distaste upon seeing him. It would be one thing if he merely failed to inherit father's golden eyes, but to end up with such pitiful looks. Li Zhongqian's brows furrowed deeply. Compared to his brother's natural charm, this younger one seemed born with a quality that repelled rather than drew people in. Li Zhongqian stared at him in silence, disbelief rising in his heart. Could he truly be father's son? He couldn't even bring himself to speak. Rising from his seat, he stepped closer, observing carefully before asking, "You're about to begin the qi cultivation realm. How can you still have these things growing on your face?" Li Zhongqian was, of course, referring to the warts on his face. Li Zhongnian, awkward as he was, seemed used to such questions and replied meekly, "I was born like this. Lord Kui has examined me and said that it will fade naturally as my cultivation improves. There's no need for any treatment." Li Zhongqian could only step back. His intention to test his brother's thoughts vanished entirely. Returning to his seat, he averted his gaze and said, "Jiangnian, since you are about to begin the qi cultivation realm, you must be here for the dust of the court. I'll give you a command token. Go to Milan and retrieve it yourself." Li Zhongnian nodded hurriedly, took the command token that Li Zhongqian handed him, and left in high spirits. As he pushed the door open and departed, both elder brothers let out a breath of relief. Li Zhongqian exhaled heavily, rubbing the center of his brows. He was unsure what to say. Li Zhongliang lowered his head slightly and said softly, "The youngest brother rarely leaves seclusion these days. Unless absolutely necessary, he eats and sleeps in his cave dwelling. He only came out tonight because his spiritual qi was running low. It's better that he stays put." Li Zhongqian sighed. "No matter where one goes in this world, a face is something that can't be avoided. Those born handsome are naturally well received, while those less fortunate draw mockery at every step. If one uses spell arts to conceal one's appearance, it only invites suspicion of deceit. Better to have him wear a mask in the future. He'll still draw attention, but at least he'll be easier on the eyes." Li Zhongliang nodded repeatedly, though Li Zhongqian could tell from a glance that he cared little whether Zhongnian covered his face or not. Smiling faintly, he said, "I heard from Uncle Julio that you once took the bright Li blazing essence some years ago. You follow the same Dao lineage as I do, cultivating the heavenly scripture of the dimming Li day. You may come to me for guidance whenever you wish." Li Zhongliang bowed. "Thank you, elder brother." He then took his leave. Li Zhongqian rose, dipped his brush into ink, wrote a few characters on the desk before him, and drew a small stack of letters from his sleeve. Glancing at Dili Guang, he ordered, "Summon the people from Qingdu and Jade Court." His eyebrows rose as he smiled and added, "Make it grand. The greater the commotion, the better. I want everyone across the island to hear it clearly." Dili Guang understood immediately, nodded, and withdrew. Soon, the entire grand hall echoed with the sound of countless footsteps. Troops clad in white armor streamed in from both side halls, sealing every doorway tightly. Shadows swayed, weapons clanged, and armor scraped. The air was filled with the noise of steel and discipline. Clang, clang. Li Zhongqian remained seated at the head of the hall as Chen Yang, clad in black armor, entered swiftly from a side door and saluted with clasped fists. Reporting to the family head, Li Zixuan is indeed at Mount Qingdu, pleading desperately in the old elder's courtyard. He has been kneeling there for 2 hours. Only 2 hours, Li Zhongqian's lips curved in amusement as he replied. He is, after all, immortal. Traveling by boat to Qingdu takes time. Fortunately, I was patient enough to wait until past midnight. He drew out a command token and smiled. Dili Guang has already gone to summon Qingdu's men. Take your squad and seal Qingdu completely the moment their forces leave the mountain. No one is to enter or leave. The greater the commotion, the better. Tell them this. I've caught someone guilty, and now I'm going to execute him. Chapter 1236, Merit Conferment and Dao Stipend, I. Li Zhongqian sent his men down and waited in the hall. Before long, a noisy commotion could be heard outside, and a line of figures quickly gathered before the main hall. After some hesitation and shoving, no one dared to step inside. Kreka. Finally, Chen Donghan and Siwei led the way into the hall, each followed by 3 of Qingdu and the Jade Court's core figures. After saluting, Li Zhongqian, who still treated the 2 elders courteously, straightened and said, "Elders, please come in first." The hall doors closed, tig. HTLY, leaving only the 2 of them standing inside. Li Zhongqian pointed to the stack of letters on the desk and said, "There are 22 candidates within the family for conferment. Uncle Julio granted each of them 3 places of protection. They may remain within the island, hold border posts, and receive annual rewards. All their activities over the past 3 years are recorded here. Suspicions, evidence, reports suppressed by Uncle Julio, and past stains buried in the family archives are all marked in red. I need the 2 divisions to cooperate. Qingdu's men are not to move. The Jade Court's men will go to summon them. Separate those brought in and confine them in the halls. No interrogation, no torture." Chen Dong hesitated to speak, while Siwei bowed and reminded him, "Family head, the family has been honest these 3 years. Those chosen for conferment have no visible faults. Even if some actions were intentional, there is no proof. To pursue old matters may invite resentment. It does not matter. Li Jianqian smiled slightly and replied, I only ask that you two elders keep everyone under watch. It will be enough to clamp down on the rumors. The two nodded in understanding. Li Jianqian personally walked down and opened the door for them. As the main doors swung open, the whispering crowd kneeling outside instantly fell silent. Li Jianqian smiled and said, One more thing, have Qingdu and the Jade Court pass the message to all lineages. Any household granted conferment found guilty of corruption or crimes against Qingdu will see its privileges reduced. One offender will implicate the entire house. The gathered crowd dispersed, and people were led up the mountain one after another. After waiting for a while, Li Jianqian saw a man with a patterned headscarf being dragged up the path. He had been waiting for him. The smile vanished from his face as his expression turned cold, and he glared sharply at the man. Li Chengzai's heart had already turned cold. When the Jade Court guards had come knocking in the middle of the night, saying one man's crime implicated an entire residence, Li Chengzai's heart had sunk instantly. What had his old man gone to do to plead guilty? Li Zixuan had rushed back midway to Qingdu to beg for leniency, but Li Chengzai had not known that. All he knew was that his father had gone to plead and had not returned even by midnight. Earlier, he and several brothers had sat together in anxious discussion, uncertain where their father might be facing punishment. His fear deepened under Li Jianqian's cold glare. Father always said the eldest young master was ruthless. With this move, our family's conferments will be gone, all 5 of them. Truly, he was a step ahead, and father walked right into his hands. The heavy doors shut tight as he was dragged into a side courtyard and locked inside. Darkness fell, and the formation sealed the place from the outside world, cutting off all communication. His heart turned to ash. When a servant entered with tea, he gave no response at all. My lord, please. He turned his head slightly, finding the servant's face vaguely familiar. After a brief pause, he asked, Are you from the Ren family? Li Zixuan's principal wife was from the Ren family, and the eastern residents had close ties with them. He quickly grabbed the servant's hand, forcing his rarely used mind to work as he stammered, Help me, send word to the eastern residents, divide the household immediately. Whoever can be saved, save them. The Ren family servant glanced at him and replied, You think too highly of me, young master. I'm just a lowly servant. How could I manage such a thing? Besides, right after you were taken away, the people of the eastern residents already divided up their assets. Li Chengzai went limp, sitting in a daze for half the day before muttering a single word, Good. While Li Chengzai struggled inside, the outside was quiet save for hurried footsteps. Moonlight spread like water. Li Jianqian stood before the hall doors as Chen Yang bowed slightly and said softly, Family head Lord Zixuan is still in the Qingdu courtyard. The eastern residence has already panicked and split their holdings. The western side had long been divided, so there's no movement there. Only 2 more branches have separated. That's enough, Li Jianqian said casually. When Elder Zixuan descends from the mountain, he'll find his eastern residence already gone. His children, now divided and resentful, will blame him alone. As the old elder said, better the resentment fall not on brothers or the family, but on Elder Zixuan himself. He let out a faint sneer as he continued, When parents brothers and sisters stand united in shared grievance, doesn't that make them closer? No bonds are broken and the family stays blameless. It was Li Zixuan who confessed first, and only then did I send men to make arrests. Now that the eastern residence has exposed itself, everyone understands the reason behind these widespread seizures. At that moment, even Chen Yang felt a chill crawl up his spine. After a brief moment of silence, he clasped his hands and said, I fear he won't cooperate. Elder Zixuan, being in the center of it all, knows the truth too well if he starts spreading word. I'm not afraid he won't cooperate. Li Jianqian flicked his sleeve, clasped his hands behind his back, and strode into the hall with a faint smile. When parents love their sons, they plan far ahead. What benefit would the eastern residents gain if he exposes the matter? Nothing but repeated division and disintegration at my hands. He's grown old and no longer dares to stand against me, who holds power. Besides, taking his seat at the main position, he lifted his brush and said, Is there any difference between pleading for leniency and admitting guilt? If one is innocent, why beg for mercy? Li Jianqian cast him a sidelong glance and finished, Go and summon Qi Juyan. Chen Yang left in a flash, and soon Qi Juyan entered from outside the hall, clearly having waited for some time. Li Jianqian raised his brows and said with a smile, Lord Qi, the matter we've discussed these past 2 months, has it been settled? Qi Juyan bowed slightly and replied respectfully, In accordance with the family head's instructions, I have selected 3 great Dao lineage manuals, 6 chapters seeking immortality's White Dawn chapter, the comprehensive record of the Scaled Beast's inquiry technique, and the general outline of the spiritual talisman method from the family's 667 Tao collection volumes. These 3 Tao lineages have been revised and supplemented with content from other Tao lineages, and are now named White Dawn, Inquiry of the Law, and Spirit Talisman. He presented the 3 volumes with both hands. Each was bound in white, gold, and violet covers, with intricate patterns that exuded an ethereal aura. Li Jianqian flipped through them twice and nodded. "My thanks, Elder." Hui Juyan stepped aside respectfully, while Li Jianqian turned to Chen Yang below and said, "Bring in the family members from each side courtyard." Everyone filed in, heads bowed and faces uneasy as they stood neatly below. Li Jianqian smiled and said, "First, I must congratulate all of you. Elder Zixuan has shown great righteousness by entering the mountain to take responsibility. The family has reviewed the matter, and thanks to Uncle Julio's keen insight, the chosen confirmant candidates have been verified. Though there were doubts, all have now been cleared. The confirmants remain valid." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the crowd below. They exchanged furtive glances, many turning to glance at Li Chengza. Li Chengza was now certain his old father had gone to plead guilty. Fortunately, nothing incriminating had been found. Otherwise, his entire household would have been hated beyond measure. He silently rejoiced as he listened to Li Jianqian continue, "I have called everyone here today for an important matter. I intend to open new paths within the family. Using Milan as the main site, we shall establish 3 branches of study, White Hand, Inquiry of the Law, and Spirit Talisman, to allow family members who cannot cultivate to pursue learning. It will also serve as a modest contribution to the family's strength." The people below lifted their heads in confusion, looking up at the platform. Li Jianqian smiled and explained, "The confirmant system will continue as before, but only the descendants of cultivators who have sacrificed for the family will be eligible. The confirmant shall extend solely to the generation possessing a spiritual orifice. If their offspring lack one, their inheritance and assets will be kept in reserve by the lake, awaiting a future descendant with a spiritual orifice, upon which the family's merit will be restored. As for the path of studying the Tao scriptures, examinations will be held in Milan every 5 years during the ancestral rites. Those who show skill in the 3 branches and possess upright conduct shall be granted posts and rewards within the family. They may remain on the island, receive stipends and honors. This will be known as the Tao stipend." The courtyard fell silent. Hui Juyan, clearly prepared in advance, drew several golden scrolls from his sleeve that were already written and sealed, and passed them down to Chen Dong and Insiwei. The Li family's confirmant privileges were far from being as unshakable as Mount Tai. If one lacked ability, even an earned post could be stripped away. The rewards and residence rights lasted for only 1 generation. If this Tao stipend system could truly work, would it not be better than confirmant itself? Everyone now raised their brows in interest. Li Jianqian continued, "This path will have 3 ranks. Later, the family will establish academies in every prefecture and even send members abroad from the island. All households, come forward to copy the scriptures." Leaning back on the high seat at the main hall, he watched the crowd below as dozens of fervent gazes drifted toward the 3 manuals. A few Foundation Establishment realm cultivators were among them, lining up obediently to make copies. Li Jianqian's gaze wandered over their delighted faces. "I will never allow you all to gain authority so easily. Only by chaining your minds to the endless annotations of the Tao scriptures, aging white-haired over study and exhaustion, will you lose the heart to scheme elsewhere. Only then will you climb, bit by bit, into a power system wholly detached from the 16 prefectures, the 2 peaks, and 1 mountain. Only then can future troubles be prevented." He smiled faintly, raising his head slightly amid the chorus of gratitude and reverence toward the family head after the scripture copying concluded. "Besides, it's not without benefits. The more they study Tao scriptures, the better they can educate their offspring. Their children with spiritual orifices will grow up learning these 3 manuals from the start. It might even help their future cultivation. This is the method of the Merit Conferment and Tao Stipend." Chapter 1237, Merit Conferment and Tao Stipend, II. Stars shimmered across the sky as night deepened. The sea lay calm for thousands of kilometers, waves still as glass. Seagulls soared high, their distant cries echoing faintly before fading into silence. Cool wind drifted through the maple grove. Clusters of jade-like lotus lanterns floated gently in the stream as light shimmered brightly upon a jade-green platform. A cultivator in a white-gold Taoist robe opened his eyes just as heavenly radiance burst forth and purple flames flickered and dispersed, illuminating the forest. Li Ziming had spent the past few days cultivating in seclusion within the woods. His injuries had nearly healed. The 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain had arranged this cultivation site for him. It was no inferior to Zhaijing Mountain in spiritual energy. On rare occasions, white jade lotus lanterns would drift down the stream, each containing a trace of valley water spirit item that was good for healing. Its fragrance was soothing. Though of little use to wounds of the Purple Mansion realm, it showed careful thought. My heaven-venerating gate divine ability has made little progress. Though I brushed against life and death and gained a bit of Tao comprehension, my cultivation has stalled due to recovery. Refining one's divine ability was a slow, grinding process. Li Ziming estimated it would take another 30 years to perfect the heaven-venerating gate. He calculated silently, my cultivation speed isn't slow according to Jiangnan's pace. If I spend 30 years to perfect this ability, then I can transition directly to the scripture of the body-guarding Tiger Pass. Without needing the profound method of continuation, another 10 years to forge my Tao foundation, and I can begin refining Sovereign in peril. There's little record on how long it takes to master a second divine ability. It depends entirely on one's aptitude. It's hard to gauge without experience, so I'll assume 10 years, 60 years to achieve Sovereign in peril, and if all goes well, I can condense the third divine ability in 120 years, reaching the mid-stage and touching the Purple Immortal threshold. The Purple Immortal threshold was renowned, and Li Ziming could calculate no further. Once he mastered 3 divine abilities, he would stand among the backbone of Jiangnan's Purple Mansion realm cultivators. Li Xiaowei would likely progress at a similar pace. By then, he would not be far inferior to even Cheng Xiao in battle. But to survive these 120 years under Cheng Xiao's shadowy hostility will not be easy. Li Ziming's situation was awkward. If he returned to Jiangnan, he had no confidence in evading Cheng Xiao's open and hidden strikes. Yet if he stayed overseas, his family would still be in danger. Although Zhao Wei took a great risk to eliminate Sidu Mo, ending our family's century-old threat and destroying a key weapon, Cheng Xiao will surely find other blades to borrow once he returns to Jiangnan, even if none as formidable as Sidu Mo. He sighed inwardly, sinking into quiet frustration, when suddenly the wind chime hanging from the maple tree jingled softly. Dressed in white, Xia Xiaoyu emerged from between the trees, bowed slightly and said respectfully, "Honored Taoist master, the 2 Taoist masters have sent word. They say the matter discussed earlier is now ready, we may set out." Xia Xiaoyu's days on 9 mounds had been nothing short of blissful for the past half-year. It was luxurious compared to the hardship of her earlier life, the spiritual energy in her cave dwelling. Ji was so dense that even the thinnest spot she could find along the mountain paths was several times richer than that of Kingsu Temple. Days of comfort had made her radiantly beautiful. A few Dharma artifact ornaments only accentuated her charm. The slightly sharp impression once given by her thin brows was now softened by the pendant resting between them. Xia Xiaoyu had always been adept at poise and presentation. She now resembled a proper daughter of a great sect, or even a Purple Mansion realm direct descendant. Li Ziming was not a petty man and felt no annoyance at her transformation. The once plain, rustic woman had become graceful and poised. It merely drew a faint smile and a nod from him as he folded his sleeves and rose, a thought forming in his mind. I can take this opportunity to ask Hufu to bring her to the lake. It's both safe and convenient, and it might even serve as a subtle warning. Zhuming is no longer young, yet he still drifts about without direction. Who knows which pleasure house he's idling in this time? That won't do. As he stepped out, he asked, "Lingdu is a kindly elder. I heard that although you're called a guest of the Immortal Mountain, your treatment is more like that of an outer disciple, with several Tao collections open to you. Is that true?" Xia Xiaoyu panicked slightly and replied urgently, "Yes, Taoist master, but all the Dharma artifacts and garments I possess were exchanged using the spirit items you bestowed upon me. I have not taken anything from the 9 mounds Tao lineage itself." Xia Xiaoyu was quick-witted, already considering several possible explanations. But Li Ziming was not nitpicking. He merely nodded slightly and said, "Not bad. I'll find you a slightly better position when the opportunity arises, but you must prove yourself worthy of it. Since several Tao collections are open to you, use this time to read and study." Xia Xiaoyu's heart trembled with both joy and disbelief. Though gifted in talent, beauty, and wit, her lowly birth had long filled her with hidden inferiority. Tears welled up in her eyes as she replied, "Taoist master, no sacrifice could ever repay your grace in reshaping my life." Walking ahead with his hands behind his back, Li Ziming nodded slightly and said, "Study more in the days to come, lest you cannot hold it steady when fortune is placed in your hands. When it's exposed and lost, regret will come too late." Xia Xiaoyu nodded repeatedly. The two soon arrived beneath the great maple tree they had spoken of earlier. Hufu stood below in his shamanic robe, conversing quietly with the aged Lingdu. Upon seeing Li Ziming approach, Lingdu rose at once and said hoarsely, "Greetings, Taoist friend Jiajing. Time is pressing, please let us depart together." Li Ziming nodded. Hufu merely greeted him briefly and remained silent. The three stepped into the great void, boundless darkness engulfing their surroundings. Only then did Lingdu speak softly. Taoist friend Hufu and I have been preparing for days, hoping to handle everything discreetly and quietly, hence the delay. But word arrived the day before yesterday that the merciful one who went to the Buddhist land to report has passed through the trials of blades and flames, endured punishment, yet was not demoted. Instead, he has returned under censure to investigate. Thus, we had no choice but to summon you in haste. Li Ziming shook his head. What could he possibly uncover now? If anything could have been divined, it would have been long ago. Had any trace been found, he would have pursued it already. There'd have been no need to go to the Buddhist land for punishment. Though he said so, a faint unease stirred within Li Ziming, such a grand commotion. I only hope that man won't return under pressure and throw all the blame on me. I'd best finish this matter quickly. Lingdu seemed to share the same thought. Instead of traveling directly through the great void, he detoured via the mortal sea, whose currents allowed for rapid traversal. It did not take long for them to reach the northern region of the Peacock Sea, where he drew a lotus from his sleeve. The lotus was pink and delicate, no larger than a palm. A withered pod hung from another stem, its 5 holes arranged neatly. Standing beside Lingdu, Li Ziming could see them clearly. Lingdu formed a hand seal, and 3 of the 5 holes responded, releasing 3 white jade-like seeds. The old cultivator said softly, "Please, take 1 each and keep it pressed against your tiger's mouth. It will shield you from Maha's divinations." "You had something this good and never mentioned it. You could have said so earlier." Relief loosened Li Ziming's chest. He pressed the lotus seed to his palm as instructed and immediately sensed a subtle change in his body as a faint 5-colored treasure light rippled beneath his skin. They followed Lingdu through the great void and emerged beneath the depths of the Peacock Sea. The waters here were dim and heavy, tinted with deep copper green. Following the others into the depths, Li Ziming soon reached a vast undersea canyon. Lingdu said, "Please wait here for a moment." The old man dove into the canyon's depths. Though Li Ziming knew the chance of betrayal was slim, unease still gnawed at him. If they've laid a formation here and the two strike together, my life would be in grave danger. I'd have a 60% chance of dying here without using the profound light. Fortunately, his suspicions proved unfounded. 15 minutes later, the seabed quaked violently and the entire ocean floor trembled. Boom! A magnificent surge of 5-colored treasure light erupted from the depths, as vast as a mansion, piercing through the layers of ocean and rushing toward the heavens. Hufu, who had been muttering incantations without pause, suddenly stopped and shouted, "Rise." A small brown pouch with intricate markings instantly flew from his sleeve, slicing through the seawater. It intercepted the surging 5-colored treasure light midway, its mouth pulsing as the 5-colored treasure light bent away from the sky, curving several miles through the depths before being drawn into the bag. Suppressing such a phenomenon was no simple task. Even though the 5-colored treasure light had not pierced the heavens, clouds of auspicious glow still rippled above the sea. Knowing what to do, Li Ziming refrained from using his own mana and instead activated the jewel in his hand, the mountain-charging, sea-pacing tiger. Beams of stable earth light shot skyward, dispersing the swirling clouds one by one. Hufu furrowed his brows, one hand maintaining control over the brown patterned pouch while he glanced at Li Ziming. He said quietly, "Taoist friend Zheajing, take heed. The Peacock Merciful One can sense this object. Though we've suppressed its aura, the Peacock Sea lies close at hand. That Merciful One will surely ride the winds here soon." Li Ziming nodded slightly. The beam of light finally began to subside after several breaths. Hufu's shoulders eased a little, until a deafening cry split the horizon, sharp enough to pierce gold and shatter stone. Ruar! A colossal beast surfaced from the sea, its feathers a blend of iridescent hues and burnished bronze. Its eyes gleamed crimson, its beak gold, and its body was as large as a small mountain. The light trailing behind it shimmered in brilliant rainbow colors, painting half the sky with treasure light. The peacock leaped upward and tore through the sea, straight toward them. From its beak came the deep, resonant voice of a middle-aged man who dares to steal from my Peacock Dao lineage. The Merciful One had arrived in an instant, transforming Midsea into a middle-aged monk clad in a robe of 5-colored silk. 6 burn marks glowed upon his shaved head, each a different hue. His hands were empty, and his eyes were blazing with fury. Li Ziming glanced sideways at Hufu, who stood in his shamanic robes, clearly delighted by the sight of the monk. Laughing boisterously, Hufu replied, "Your father." The monk turned toward the sound, froze on the spot, and felt his heart seize in shock. Purple Mansion Realm cultivators, 2 of them. The Merciful One himself was roughly at the early stage of the Purple Mansion Realm. Though sitting beneath the Lotus Throne greatly enhanced one's survivability, it did little to increase raw power. At best, he could match cultivators wielding 2 divine abilities, but against those who had crossed the purple immortal threshold, it would take 3 to 5 merciful ones like him to stand a chance. The sight of 2 purple mansion realm cultivators made his heart sink. Since Li Ziming and Hufu had both restrained their auras, concealing their true cultivation, he could not gauge their strength. Still, he was a peacock, a merciful one of the great Boon Bronze Color Temple. His pride held firm as he said coldly, "Taoist master, I do not know which Tao lineage you hail from, but surely you know the Peacock Sea is under the dominion of the great Boon Bronze Color Temple. That treasure light belongs to our Tao lineage. Relinquish it at once. Our great Boon Bronze Color Temple commands 4 merciful ones in total. They are already on their way. Do not make a mistake, Taoist friend." Li Ziming's bright yang divine ability was not suited for concealing his presence, and he could not gauge the monk's power of divination. Thus he kept silent. Hufu, however, burst into wild laughter, his tone arrogant and unruly as he replied coldly, "My name needs no hiding nor change. I am Taoist Master Buzi of the Supreme Yang Azure Pond Sect. Now get lost." Li Ziming stood stunned, nearly turning his head to look at him, muttering inwardly, "Wait, Hufu, you what?" Chapter 12:38, Great Peacock Karma I. Taoist Master Hufu was a man of few words, perhaps because of his Ziyuqida. O lineage, his temperament leaned toward gloom. Combined with his prideful reputation, Li Ziming had always regarded him as a stern and cautious man. But the words that had just left his mouth caught Li Ziming completely off guard, and laughter was bubbling up in his heart. "Good, good, good." The peacock before them, appearing as a middle-aged man, narrowed his eyes. The colorful monk's robe on his body shimmered brilliantly as he said coldly, "Fellow Taoist, do you take me to be blind?" Perhaps Hufu had lied without thinking, but the peacock refused to believe him. If Grand Taoist Master Kai Buzi of the Azure Pond Sect were truly here, how could he, Yuguang, still be standing? These 2 Purple Mansion realm cultivators clearly surpassed him in strength, yet they were acting furtive and evasive. It could only mean they had provoked the great Boon Bronze Color Temple and dared not admit it. The peacock immediately regained his confidence and sneered, "I've heard Kai Buzi is a wild-haired, blue-robed, gold-tasseled, green-eyed specter whose divine abilities are extraordinary. How could the likes of you 2 sneaky rats compare? Step aside at once." Hufu's face visibly darkened at those words. His voice grew hoarse as he replied, "A gaudy feathered chicken dares to yap at me." The tension between them grew as taut as drawn blades, and Li Ziming would have to intervene if they truly came to blows. He quickly stepped forward and said calmly, "This site was excavated by my fellow Taoist friend and I by right of discovery. It belongs to us. Since when did it become the territory of the Peacock Tao lineage?" Yuguang laughed angrily, seeing through his intentions at a glance, and shouted, "Don't pretend ignorance while knowing the truth full well. You're just stalling for time. I'll see for myself what kind of people you really are." His sleeve suddenly billowed, summoning a swirl of multicolored flames from the void. They descended from above as he lifted his palms, the blaze burning fiercely in the sea as it lanced toward Hufu. "There's no avoiding this strike." Li Ziming frowned slightly. "I still underestimated Yuguang's position within the Buddhist land. Who knows how far he has progressed in his non-retrogression. Judging by the Merciful One's daring intent to keep a retreat within the Buddhist land, the strength of 2 Purple Mansion realm cultivators clearly isn't enough to make him back down without a fight." He had agreed beforehand that Li Ziming would make the move. Since the Purple Mansion realm's spiritual flames had not yet been secured, he could not simply stand idle. He was just about to raise his hand when he saw the small pouch in midair, which had been absorbing treasure light, begin to glow with a dim radiance. Supreme Yang brilliance flared from its sides with a sizzling roar as it drew in ever finer threads of light. The Supreme Yang radiance flowed effortlessly within the water, drifting before Hufu and shielding him from the flames. The Supreme Yang was the first of manifestations, and its brilliance instantly suppressed the fire into dim submission. Hufu's cold voice drifted out amid the violent clash of forces. "Old mutt, you've truly made me strike. Your flock of peacocks can't afford the price." Yuguang glanced up once and realized the pouch-shaped spirit artifact floating in the air was no common item. His lips twitched, but he said nothing. A bronze staff appeared in his hand. He vanished with a single step into the void. A surge of danger flared in Li Ziming's heart. The heavenly light at the center of his brows darted back and forth as his face burned painfully, and he cursed inwardly, "Damn it. That gaudy-feathered, bald donkey bullies the weak and fears the strong." Fortunately, the heaven-venerating gate carried properties akin to body divine ability. The heavenly light at the center of his brows was formidable. It sensed the bronze staff descending with only a slight pause. His lips quivered, and he spat out a breath of purple flame. Previously, he had used the mountain-charging sea-pacing tiger technique to conceal his bright yang divine ability when dispersing the auspicious clouds unnoticed. Now that he faced a direct confrontation, hiding it was impossible. Since his spirit artifact was even more distinctive, Li Ziming chose to keep it concealed and respond solely with bright yang flames. The purple fire transformed into a blazing purple serpent, coiling upward along the bronze staff. The mana within the staff crackled sharply under the heat, yet Yu Guang pressed down with a fierce momentum, his staff radiating blinding light as it inched toward Li Ziming's face. Bang! Li Ziming raised his hand, channeling his bright yang divine ability and mana into his palm as he deftly deflected the opponent's bronze staff. His Dharma body trembled slightly, and he used the momentum to slip into the great void, feeling a searing pain in his palm. What? This merciful one truly has a formidable Dharma body. Li Ziming had no intention of using the heaven-venerating gate's true body, as doing so would be equivalent to announcing to the peacocks that he was the thief. By only using the bright yang divine ability, he could still leave himself a way out if things escalated. Sure enough, the monk lifted his staff, eyes widening in suspicion as he said, "Bright Yang, are you from the Kui family?" The peacocks lived in the Outer Sea, and the most renowned Bright Yang Dao lineage in the Eastern Sea was none other than the Kui family of Changzhou Island. Not only did all the Eastern Sea Kui branches originate from that island, but several Purple Mansion Realm cultivators had once arisen among them, though they had always maintained a low profile. Recently, the Li family had visited, claiming that the Kui family's Purple Mansion Realm cultivators were all gone, but with Peacock Sea being so far away, it was no surprise they hadn't heard. Naturally, their first suspicion fell upon the Kui family. Li Ziming vanished into the great void, and the monk chose not to pursue. Instead, he dove straight into the ocean trench below, while Hufu emerged behind the pouch-shaped spirit artifact, pressing both hands upon it to hasten the absorption of treasure light. Li Ziming had no choice but to step through the great void once again and reappear before the monk, using both divine ability and mana to block him. The monk grew impatient and struck twice in quick succession, forcing Li Ziming back. Then, with a flick of his sleeve, he drew out a circular disc. The disc appeared to be made of bronze, radiating a gleaming iridescence. Its surface was inlaid with multicolored gemstones, forming a vivid, resplendent depiction. The painting depicted a vast, multicolored ocean, with a towering spirit mountain rising at its center. A peacock with enormous wings was inscribed across the heavens, its head raised in a skyward cry. Beneath it knelt a nude woman, face filled with reverence, cradling two swaddled infants. One of the infants was wrapped in white cloth, a cherubic smiling human baby, the other in red, a tiny pink peacock wailing with its beak agape. The peacock in the painting suddenly opened its eyes, releasing beams of crimson light. Though Li Ziming had anticipated it and had already shifted through the great void, a sharp sting still pricked between his brows. Alarmed, he swiftly drew back his flames to shield himself. The red light came too swiftly. Even with his early reaction, Li Ziming's entire body sank under its force as multicolored flames climbed his Dharma body, bursting in a cascade of crystalline shatters. Crack. Not good. Having experienced a similar incident with Cheng Xiao, Li Ziming felt his heart clench the moment he saw such flames. Startled, he leapt several kilometers through the great void. A vial of spirit water appeared in his hand, and he quickly applied his bright yang divine ability to the wound, feeling an immediate coolness spread. Only then did he dare to inspect the damage, yet the flames had already vanished, leaving merely a fingernail-sized blemish on his Dharma body. Oh, that's it, pathetic. He broke into a quiet sweat. The monk's techniques were a complete joke compared to Cheng Xiao's spell arts. One was plain but deadly, the other dazzling yet hollow. Taking several steps forward through the void, he reappeared, purple fire surging. The monk's brows eased as he wielded his treasured disc once more, clashing with Li Ziming in rapid succession before shouting, "Which Dao lineage are you a Taoist master of?" Li Ziming had once joined King Heng to subdue the merciful one Fuxia, who had fallen from the way of wrath to the rank of master monk. Despite their many attacks, he had endured unscathed by sheer strength of his Dharma body. Now, even with his Purple Mansion Realm cultivation, Li Ziming found this peacock's Dharma body equally formidable. Reluctant to expose his divine ability, he fought with only his body, and was indeed being pushed back. But unlike Hufu, he had no powerful background and sought only to stall the monk. Thus he deliberately dragged out his words. "I am Gufeng, a mere rogue cultivator from the southern sea. The treasures below belong to us and have nothing to do with the merciful one. I ask that you withdraw." He followed courtesy with threats. When the grand Taoist master below emerges, the merciful one may well lose another Dharma body. Lingdu was no grand Taoist master at all, nor would he appear. Li Ziming was bluffing through and through. Though the peacock had the upper hand, his lack of a divine ability and mounting irritation made him waver with doubt. At that moment, Yu Guang hovered in the air, his expression dark and brooding. "These two are suspicious. This one has fought all this time without showing his divine ability. If I press him further, I might force." Him to kill me. As for that man holding the pouch, his spirit artifact is no common item. If they truly belong to the supreme Yang Dao lineage, things could become troublesome. One must know that the great Boon bronze-colored temple had only recently lost a merciful one. Now a group concealing their faces and names stood before him. It was highly suspicious. Could they be the cultivators who killed Yus? If so, that would be fatal trouble. Li Ziming couldn't tell whether the man truly believed that, or simply lacked the confidence to break through his defense. His heart froze slightly as he thought, the peacocks of the great Boon bronze-colored temple's peacock sea have lived too comfortably. How could they compare to the cunning and scheming Jiangnan cultivators, half wanting to fight, half wanting to retreat? What a waste of timing. Since we avoided using divine abilities to stay unknown, we could have simply charged to the depths and perhaps even negotiated a share of the spoils. Each harbored his own thoughts, their judgments diverging by 1,000 miles, yet the merciful one's desire to retreat grew stronger. Yu Guang ceased his attacks. He dared not provoke Hufu, who wielded what seemed to be a supreme Yang Dao lineage treasure. Instead, he glared at Li Ziming, pressed his palms together, and said coldly, "Fellow Taoist Yufeng, you have taken what belongs to the Buddhist land. Karma will surely find you. You will one day enter the soil yourself to return it, and retribution will come, life, wealth, all lost. The old monk speaks now, so wait and see." Li Ziming couldn't help but laugh in anger at the peacock's self-righteous tone. Shaking his head, he retorted bluntly, "Featherless bird, if you don't leave now, we'll gladly send you back to your Buddhist land ourselves." Yu Guang's eyes darkened, but he finally vanished from sight. Li Ziming withdrew his mana and flew down to shallower waters, where the treasure light had dwindled to a thread as thin as a finger. Hufu lifted the mouth of his pouch slightly, collecting the last of the glow, then nodded toward Li Ziming. "Many thanks, Zheajing. You've endured much." Chapter 12:39, Great Peacock Karma II. That featherless bird had been fierce outwardly but weak at heart. He was thoroughly cowed by Hufu's supreme Yang Dao lineage spirit artifact. Li Ziming hadn't even used his heaven-venerating gate, so he bore no real blame, perhaps only some suspicion. Now that he had obtained the Purple Mansion realm's spiritual flames, the gains were already considerable. How could that be considered suffering? He cupped his hands and said, "I should be the one thanking you, Taoist friend Hufu." He spoke with genuine sincerity. Though Hufu's spirit artifact had been exposed, he hadn't even needed to unleash its supreme Yang radiance. Since Li Ziming had been designated to act, Hufu could easily have let Yu Guang continue and let Li Ziming bear the blame entirely. Without the deterrence of that supreme Yang light and Hufu's presence, Yu Guang might never have backed down. Hufu waved his hand and said gravely, "Yu Guang brought the peacock birth-giving disc, which was unexpected. Were his cultivation not insufficient, even we might have struggled to deal with the artifact's recognition. So it was the monk who was lacking, not that the treasure was all show." Li Ziming nodded slightly and seized the chance to ask, "I rarely see the treasure artifacts of Buddhist cultivators. Do they all have sentience? Why does one need to earn their recognition?" Hufu sneered, "A spirit artifact is a tool, and a Taoist master is a person. A treasure artifact is a tool, yet the merciful ones are hardly worthy of being called people. They even serve as slaves to the Maha in the Buddhist land. When a rich man buys a carriage, is the coachman more valuable than the cart? When a landlord hires tenants, are they more esteemed than the oxen? It's the same principle. Recognition or not, it depends on whether the master chooses to give the tenant an ox." His tone carried thick mockery as he continued, "The peacock birth-giving disc belongs to the peacock's offspring. It should correspond to our level of spirit treasures. It has its own distinct name, in fact." Li Ziming frowned. "That's exactly what puzzles me. Why don't Buddhist cultivators distinguish their tools? Master monks use treasure artifacts, merciful ones use treasure artifacts, and even the Maha use treasure artifacts. Doesn't that make for an awkward hierarchy?" Hufu's sneer deepened. He stowed his bulging pouch-shaped spirit artifact and replied, "If they truly drew such clear lines, letting the immortal and Buddhist Taos match artifact for artifact, what grand act would the Buddhist land have left to perform? How many spirit treasures has the immortal Tao produced since the human emperor's founding? And how many treasure artifacts of that same level has the Buddhist land forged? The I.M. Mortal Tao surpasses them tenfold. When compared instead by Dharma relics, can the 7 Taos even muster 10 relics between them? My supreme Yang Dao lineage alone can count 7 by name, and that's not even counting those lost across the ages. The fools of the 7 Taos can hardly accept that, so in the Buddhist land, only the Maha's treasures are called Buddhist artifacts. If a merciful one wishes to use one, they must first ask permission." Li Ziming nodded, understanding dawning in his heart. He started to pay even more attention to the peacock birth-giving disc. If what he says is true, then treasure artifacts of spirit treasure grade are exceedingly rare and even more revered. The peacock clan's status must be far higher than rumors suggest. The two exchanged a few more words when suddenly, Lingdu's aged voice echoed in their ears. Fellow Taoists, the matter is settled. Hold fast to the tigermouth lotus seed, take the long route through the great void, conceal your traces, and make your way to 9 mounds. Delight flickered in Li Ziming's heart. He exchanged a glance with Hufu, and the two parted ways without another word, vanishing in one breath into the boundless great void. As soon as Li Ziming entered the great void, a cool sensation spread from his tiger's mouth. Using the vast emptiness as his path, he flew eastward in one breath to the end of the sea, then circled halfway around its edge, nearly reaching Shiki, before finally heading toward 9 Mounds' immortal mountain. 2 days had passed by the time he reached the mountain. The sky hung dim and gray. Hufu sat in the courtyard before the mountain gate, sipping tea. It was clear he had been waiting. When he finally saw Li Ziming, he remarked, "Zheajing, you are cautious indeed." "How could I not be cautious? I was the one who struck, and the bright Yang Dao lineage is hardly adept at concealment. It's not like Xiuqui, who appears and vanishes without a trace." He cupped his hands with a smile and said, "My apologies for keeping you waiting, senior." Time had already been long spent. Hufu did not bother pouring him tea. Instead, he cleared the entire tea set from the table in one motion, leaving Li Ziming no chance for idle words. The two entered together. They found Lingdu standing among crimson leaves in a grove of maples, leaning on his staff. Before him stood another figure, dressed in a dark robe with a white-green sash at his waist. He was tall and straight, with bound black hair falling down his back. Hearing their approach, the man turned. He appeared young and was strikingly handsome with his faintly red pupils. There was something eerie and inhuman about his gaze. He did not seem of the kindly sort. Seeing that even Lingdu stood deferentially before him, Li Ziming could already guess the man's identity. Hufu too lowered his head for the first time, bowing before the man and saying solemnly, "Junior Hufu greets Taoist Master Yuandao." Li Ziming hurriedly followed suit, bowing deeply as he said, "Junior Zheajing pays respects to the Grand Taoist Master." Li Ziming had long heard of the Tantai family's Grand Taoist Master, Tantai Lingtong, famed throughout the realm. Taoist Master Yuandao had already cultivated his 5th divine ability, and his cultivation surpassed even that of Si Baxiu. He stood at the pinnacle of the Purple Mansion realm. Though none could say how close he was to forming a golden core, there were few in this world who would dare offend him. Even a Maha would not dare display arrogance before this Grand Taoist Master. They would have to speak politely to him and respectfully discuss the Tao. After the two paid their respects, the Grand Taoist Master's demeanor proved utterly unlike his intimidating appearance. His tone was gentle and courteous, calm as still water, without the slightest trace of arrogance. "Both of you please sit." Li Ziming sat down obediently, while Hufu looked slightly uneasy. Only Lingdu moved naturally, brewing tea for the three of them. Taoist Master Yuandao watched with a faint smile. "How fares fellow Taoist Luing these days? It has been some time since I last saw him." The question was clearly directed at Hufu. Li Ziming lowered his eyes and remained silent, while Hufu answered in a steady voice. "The ancestor lingered at the Purple Mansion threshold for 100 years, his spirit worn thin. Though he has now broken through, his time grows short. He often speaks of your divine abilities and misses the days he conversed with you." Taoist Master Yuandao placed one hand on the table and accepted the small cup Lingdu handed over. Li Ziming caught a glimpse of a slender strand of sandalwood beads looped around his wrist. The Grand Taoist Master nodded, turned toward them and said, "Truly, the younger generation is formidable. I had thought Hufu achieved divine ability early enough, yet to see Zheajing also attain the Purple Mansion ray. As a rogue cultivator in under a century, remarkable indeed." After all, the meager heritage of the Li family was nothing before someone like him. To call Li Ziming a rogue cultivator was not inaccurate, and Li Ziming saw no need to correct him. He merely replied, "This junior merely had some luck. It's far beneath your divine ability, Taoist Master." Taoist Master Yuandao chuckled lightly and said, "My thanks for your efforts this time. Lingdu indeed obtained the spiritual flames within that temple. Lingdu." Lingdu quickly reached into his robe and took out a small vermilion ceramic bowl, placing it gently on the table. The tiny bowl was exquisite. It was smooth, spotless, and no larger than a child's fist, fitting perfectly in the palm. Darkness pooled like ink inside, and within that void flickered a single ember of grayish-red flame, ringed faintly with 5-colored halos. It was no bigger than a grain of rice. Taoist Master Yuandao took a sip of tea, noticing that Li Ziming could not recognize the item, and spoke, "This is the little peacock karma merging fire, commonly referred to as the little peacock karma. Though it appears no larger than a grain of rice within the bowl, if released, it could expand to the size of a mountain. This flame evolved from the desire origin merging fire. That fire arises from the bin crow during its mating, the second flame that leaks from between its beak and teeth. It is the essence of passion beyond mere lust. When the bin crow mates, its beak points at the sun. The first fire corresponds to the supreme yang, while the second corresponds to bright yang, possessing the effect of harmonizing male and female essence. Hence, in ancient times, the bin crow was said to display its passion even beneath the daylight sky. Such a level of Taoist discourse was enough to shake Li Ziming to his core. Even Hufu, beside him, stared at the bowl in absorbed focus. The grand Taoist master, however, suddenly paused and flicked his finger. Instantly, the toll of celestial bells echoed across the entire immortal mountain. Lingdu, standing nearby, explained, when the Taoist master discusses mysteries involving ancient true monarchs or demon lords, disciples must be warned to raise defenses, lest the merging fire respond to his words and fall, burning the woods. Taoist master Yuandao paused briefly, then continued, this flame was acquired by the great peacock and passed to his eldest son. That son entered the Buddhist Tao, his name cannot be spoken, and refined this fire into the great peacock Karma. The little peacock Karma, the one before us, was born from his lineage. Li Ziming listened as though hearing a celestial myth. The divine abilities of these ancient cultivators were too terrifying to fathom. Even hearing about them stirred awe within him. He swallowed hard as Yuandao continued, the little peacock Karma can be considered emerging fire. In the hands of a Buddhist cultivator, it becomes karmic fire, a rare and potent fire. Its power ranks at least above the median among the Purple Mansion realm's spiritual flames. Li Ziming felt both joy and a tinge of regret. He had long anticipated that the spiritual flame obtained might not be the radiant fire he desired. There were countless types of flames under heaven, and no single inheritance could guarantee the exact one sought. Still, he had chosen to take part decisively, largely because of the Yang nourishing technique. The Yang nourishing technique had once been Chelong Jian's fortuitous encounter. It allowed transformation between several fire Daos, primarily among the radiant, true, and virile fires. Since Lingdu had already excluded virile or dry fire, Li Ziming's chances of converting his flame into radiant fire were very high. Yet the Yang nourishing technique did not encompass every variation within the three fire Daos, and there was also the merging fire to consider. Thus, Li Ziming had mentally been prepared for the possibility that conversion might fail. He was not greedy, and any Purple Mansion spiritual flame was a treasure worth having. Though it turned out to be emerging fire, the Grand Taoist Master's words made clear that its might was formidable. Li Ziming still felt it was a fair trade, yet doubts arose in his heart. I merely deflected some suspicion. Am I truly worthy of such a reward? This merging fire practically bears the word peacock on its face. If I were to use it in battle, wouldn't I be carrying the blame squarely on my back? Had Yuandao not explained it so clearly, Li Ziming might have accepted politely and left it at that. But with the Grand Taoist Master himself seated before him, speaking so directly, Li Ziming could only bow and say respectfully, this junior is unworthy of a flame of such might. I beg the Grand Taoist Master to reclaim it. Taoist Master Yuandao raised an eyebrow slightly and shook his head. There's no need for such courtesy. You are, after all, a power under Origin Mansion's domain. My supreme Mount Dao lineage shares close ties with the Origin Mansion, offering aid where due is only natural. It's merely one spiritual flame. Li Ziming's heart jolted in shock, so this Dao lineage has deep ties with the Origin Mansion. If they stand on equal footing, this Taoist Master Tantai would be on the same level as Taoist Master Donghua in his prime. That's incredible. Even if slightly lower, it's still a lineage ranked among the three sects. No wonder he's so formidable. The Tantai family truly has immense backing. He quickly bowed once again and said, Senior, merit should match the reward. This junior dares not overreach, especially since this little peacock Karma is a treasure of the Peacock clan. To hold it would be like grasping a burning coal. I truly dare not make use of it. Taoist Master Yuandao did not rise. He waited until Li Ziming finished his first bow, then reached out to lift him gently, halting any further obeisance. His voice was calm as he said, Zheajing, you are too polite. Rest assured, since I've spoken of this matter with you, I have no ill intent. Chapter 1240, 9 Mounds, Goodwill I. Taoist Master Yuandao pointed lightly at the vermilion ceramic bowl on the small table. His reddish pupils flickered as he spoke. I know that Zheajing is troubled over the matter of the peacock. The little peacock Karma is exceedingly rare in this world, and flaunting it in public will only bring misfortune. Not only does the great Boon Bronze Color Temple covet this fire, but at least 5 of the 7 northern Dao sects Buddhist cultivators could achieve enlightenment through this karmic fire. Holding it will only invite endless trouble. I will give Zheajing 3 choices. He shifted his cup slightly, extended his hand and said, although the little peacock Karma is a karmic fire born from the Buddhist land, its nature is still bound to the desire origin merging fire. It is not like the great peacock Karma, which was personally refined by a great divine ability cultivator. I am familiar with the Peacock Dao lineage and can help you convert it into another type of merging fire called returning flame to completion. It is likewise connected to Bright Yang and is one of the few gentle merging fires. It can refine pills but not forge artifacts, nor is it compatible with converging water or stir-jeng metal. Though the transformation process is tedious, time-consuming, and costly, and returning flame to completion is far less valuable than the little peacock karma, there happens to be a portion in the mountain that you can retrieve first. This is the first choice. Li Ziming was slightly moved and nodded respectfully, though doubt arose in his heart. Most likely, even the 9 Mounds Dao lineage can only turn the little peacock karma into returning flame to completion, but not reverse it back. Taoist Master Yuandao's words clearly show that he has no intention of letting go of the little peacock karma. As he pondered silently, Taoist Master Yuandao continued, "Second, hand the little peacock karma to my 9 Mounds Dao lineage, and I will exchange it for a spiritual flame. This fire is a true fire known as the profound fire of the 3 phases guard." In ancient times, when the Supreme Yang and Bright Yang grew stronger while the Supreme Yin and Veiled Yin weakened, true fire became fiercer while Mansion Water grew gentler. True fire usually leaned toward artifact refinement, but the profound fire of the 3 phases guard is an exception. It still resonates with the surplus position of ancient true fire and retains the characteristics of that bygone era. It excels particularly in alchemy. However, it is inferior to returning flame to completion in terms of spell combat. No matter how gentle that one is, it remains a merging fire, whereas the profound fire of the 3 phases guard lacks the ferocity of true fire in this current age, making it a step weaker. He sipped his tea and finally said, "Third, I can also compensate you with another spirit item. Water and fire flourish here, with no other Dao that can compare. I do not intend to take advantage of you. Aside from the profound fire of the 3 phases guard, there is also a portion of pristine water on 9 Mounds Mountain." Li Ziming suddenly found himself torn as Taoist Master Yuandao finished. "Without the radiant fire, I wonder if the profound fire of the 3 phases guard could be converted into radiant fire. The returning flame to completion can refine pills and be used in spell combat, and it harmonizes with Bright Yang. It's not a bad choice either." The spiritual flames offered by Taoist Master Yuandao were far too tempting. The profound fire of the 3 phases guard was clearly something only these ancient Dao lineages would possess. Converting it into radiant fire would be nothing short of wasteful, even if Li Ziming were to obtain it. He knew he would cherish it dearly and could never bring himself to convert it into radiant fire. Aside from his indecision over the 2 fires, Li Ziming harbored a deeper, more private concern. This grand Taoist master and I are neither kin nor old acquaintances, so why such generosity? I merely lent a hand this time, yet he offers such a weighty compensation. Could this be tying me into a great karmic entanglement? The realization made him hesitate belatedly. Alas, I act rashly at the sight of immediate gain too often. I should have been like Brother Zijin, who always thinks things through and makes careful arrangements before acting. I seem to have walked into another thicket of trouble, but fortunately the 9 Mounds bear no true malice. This may yet be mended. Out of this concern, Li Ziming rose from his seat and bowed respectfully. Jiajing has long been content at heart to be able to form a connection with 9 Mounds and offer but a meager effort, moreover, to meet the grand Taoist master face to face. I harbor no greed, only the wish to remove the imprint. Now, fearing the peacock's malignant might and unable to calm my dread, I dare not accept the grand Taoist master's spirit items. I only beg a bit of shelter to avoid its venomous beak." Hufu was slightly taken aback, while Taoist Master Yuandao merely raised an eyebrow, his lips curving faintly as he said, "You are quite the cautious one. Since that's the case, I may as well make it clear to you, but what you hear must never be spoken again." Li Ziming nodded at once, and the grand Taoist master said with a smile, "You guessed right. Something extraordinary was indeed taken from this Dao collection, something vital to the peacock. If a treasure of this level were known to exist, it would shake all the Buddhist land, startling the Maha above, and even Pai Jia and Zipo themselves would come to claim it." Li Ziming's heart sank, but he felt oddly relieved when the other spoke so openly. Taoist Master Yuandao's faintly crimson eyes stayed on him as he said, "But this matter was not something my 9 Mounds Dao lineage did in secret, do you understand? Pai Jia has strictly ordered Yuquan to personally report it to the Buddhist land. This treasure must not fall into the peacock's hands, nor can even its trail be discovered by them. The peacocks may not be worth much themselves, but their voice carries far." Yuandao's expression had darkened by the final words. Li Ziming nodded in understanding, and Yuandao spoke softly. "No matter how Yuquan later reports the loss of the Peacock Dao collection to Pai Jia and Zipo, the 2 Maha will not act in earnest. They will dawdle, handle the matter lightly, and rather not see you fall into the peacock's hands, lest they gain even the slightest inkling. The only ones you have truly offended are a few peacocks within this temple. Even if the secret were to be exposed overnight, it would merely cause an uproar and internal chaos across the Buddhist land. No one would regard you as the true culprit. As for the spiritual flames, Yuandao glanced at him with a faint smile and said softly, whether it be the returning flame to completion or the profound fire of the three phases guard, both are tied to 9 mounds. This means my Dao lineage has already taken you under its protection, signaling to the Buddhist land that the immortal Dao will not sacrifice even a single purple mansion realm cultivator over this affair. Li Ziming suddenly understood and nodded repeatedly. He bowed once more toward Yuandao and said, "Many thanks, Grand Taoist Master, this junior." Yuandao waved his hand dismissively and said casually, "No need for thanks. My 9 mounds cannot assist with great matters, but we can lend a hand in small affairs. When your family truly faces trouble in the future, do not blame my Dao lineage for standing aside." Words came suddenly, even bordering on impolite. Li Ziming was momentarily taken aback, but Hufu nodded slightly and followed up. "The Grand Taoist Master has always been charitable. 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain has aided many, so such matters are inevitable. Jiajing is a man of integrity and has a fine reputation in Jiangnan. His great-uncle is one of Taoist Master Yuansu's most capable men." Yuandao smiled faintly and gestured toward Lingdu as he said, "Bring the fire." Lingdu immediately went below, while Yuandao began to speak leisurely. "It's a long story. In those years, Yuansu and Yunxiu both visited 9 Mounds. I was of the same generation as them. Those two brothers quarreled often and once had such a fierce argument that they parted on bad terms, never to grow close again. But some days ago, Yunxiu came to see me. When he mentioned Yuansu, his eyes lowered and his brow tensed, like a man sitting on needles. It seems he still bears some affection after all." Li Ziming nodded respectfully on the surface, though a faint doubt arose in his heart if that's the case. Even Yunxiu, the youngest of the 3 Yuans of the Azure Pond sect, has little lifespan left. How much better could this Taoist master Yuandao be? Yet judging by his appearance, his essence, qi, and spirit remain at their peak. He even looks like a young man, and his tone carries no trace of old age. Unless he's using some divine ability to conceal it, this must be an extraordinary longevity cultivation method. Just as he finished his thought, Lingdu returned from the side, carrying 2 small bowls in his hands. One appeared to be forged from Zheng metal, coated with some unknown substance that gave it a dull sheen. The other was the same vermilion ceramic bowl, both about the size of a child's fist. Lingdu presented them before him, first uncovering the Zheng metal one to reveal a faintly golden gray speck the size of a grain of rice, and explained, "This is returning flame to completion, a type of merging fire. A portion of it is stored within the mountain. This fire can damage tools, so it must be contained within seamless Zheng metal." Then he revealed the other, a bright red speck no larger than a grain of rice. 9 Mounds must have possessed an extraordinary sealing method, for no matter how fierce a flame, once captured in the bowl, it became as small as a grain of rice. This is the profound fire of the 3 phases guard, a true fire. As true fire refines metal, it is therefore stored in a glazed ceramic Dharma artifact tempered with converging water. Knowing that the 2 were meant for his choice, Li Ziming hesitated briefly, then picked up the vermilion ceramic bowl and said respectfully, "This junior follows the Grand Taoist Master's will and shall remember this great kindness, never to forget it." Returning flame to completion and the profound fire of the 3 phases guard were nearly equal in rarity, though in terms of value, the latter was likely superior. On the other hand, returning flame to completion was slightly stronger and could also refine pills, with the added benefit of harmonizing with bright yang. Yet Li Ziming reasoned that, with his talisman qi from the valley wind leading fire, he lacked little in such harmony. Moreover, the profound fire of the 3 phases guard was a true fire, and very likely compatible with the transformations in the yang nourishing technique. Even though Li Ziming had no intention of converting such a precious flame, having another path open was certainly not a bad thing. The great Li White radiance requires radiant fire to cultivate and perform. It cannot be achieved without that fire, but if I could convert it temporarily, complete my cultivation, then change it back later, that would be ideal. The subtle mysteries of returning flame to completion and profound fire of the 3 phases guard were far beyond what Yuandao and the others could sum up in a few words. Each had its own unique applications under different circumstances, and even if Li Ziming were to regret his choice in the future, he could only make his decision here and now. "Congratulations, Jiajing." Hufu offered his congratulations, and Lingdu nodded slightly with a smile. "The profound fire of the 3 phases guard is not easy to refine. Take this glazed bowl with it. Even if Jiajing does not refine it here on 9 Mounds Immortal Mountain, it will be convenient to carry." Li Ziming had already been eyeing the item with desire, nearly wishing to grab the golden bowl as well and polish it against his sleeve before tucking it into his robe. Yet he spoke modestly, How could I dare accept such generosity? In truth, Li Ziming had no real use for the bowl. With his valley wind leading fire, any flame he touched, even the profound fire of the three phases guard, could be refined in an instant. He accepted it merely to keep a low profile, and since it cost him nothing, why refuse a free treasure? He happily stored away the bowl, and Lingdu said gently, "There is still the hidden refinement pool that must be inspected. This, please, Grand Taoist Master, take a look." It was unclear whether his hesitation was toward Yuandao or Li Ziming, for probing another's Dharma body was often a taboo act, one that could easily leave hidden means behind. But Li Ziming, protected by his treasures, felt no fear. He merely feigned a brief moment of hesitation before extending his hand. Yuandao glanced sideways, lightly placed his hand upon his, and withdrew at once. The Grand Taoist Master's pupils flickered as his gaze swept over Li Ziming's body, saying with slight surprise, "I detect none of the traces of the Daoxuan Dao lineage and the marks left by that silver bottle Lingdu mentioned. The karmic tie of the peacock birth-giving disc has also been dissolved by the 7 abandonment lotus seed, Jiajing's Dharma body and cultivation. Apart from a few minor injuries, bear nothing else unusual." Taiyage. At old Fox Changxiao, as expected, he's been playing those tricks again. Li Ziming cursed inwardly, while Yuandao continued, "Still, since you are here, you may as well take a round through the place. These small wounds can be healed along the way, and it may even slightly advance your cultivation. Please remain in the cave residence for a while, Jiajing. The hidden refinement pool in the mountains will not thaw until midnight. When the time approaches, I will send disciples to escort you." Li Ziming understood that he was being dismissed. He offered his thanks, bowed slightly, and left quickly. Once he had departed, Yuandao asked, "What do you think?" Hufu thought for a moment and replied, "His innate ability is decent, and his temperament kind. Unfortunately, his background is too shallow. He hasn't seen true treasures, so he's easily swayed and not good at refusing others. However, reaching the Purple Mansion realm shows that his heart is not lacking. He's first-rate among ordinary family cultivators, but merely average among Purple Mansion realm peers. Still, one thing stands out. The incident at Profound Peak Gate shows his stubborn, promise-keeping nature. He's fit for friendship, but poses little danger as an enemy." Yuandao laughed quietly. He looked even younger than Hufu and said simply, "Stubborn loyalty, perhaps, or maybe he just values sentiment, or it could simply be that he doesn't know how to back down gracefully."